Okay, I'm going to call the meeting for June 28th, 2021 to order for the Canby Planning Commission. First, we'll have our invocation. So in light of the heat wave, I hope that everybody is comfortable and staying cool and taking care of folks that may not have air conditioning and are uncomfortable. And on the other hand, I'm hoping that we have a safe meeting tonight, and we do the work that the citizens of Canby would like us to do, and we'll move from there. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And welcome, everybody. This is trying weather for everybody. So let's get started. Ryan, are you going to be? Did we decide that you were the one that was going to review with the other commissioners the consent?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so these consent items are just the final findings for the two items that were heard on the 14th, which was the directly the last planning commission that we had. So this is something that the planning commission has always done, but for the last few years, there would be a decision made on the item, and then right after that, we would have the planning commission vote on final findings. We've changed that up a little bit because we've kind of realized over time that creating draft findings when we don't know exactly what the planning commission's decision is going to be is kind of jumping the gun a little bit. I mean, obviously they can be changed once the decision's made, but this is more in line with the way our code reads. And so it's just a way of us drafting final findings after the decision and then distributing them as part of the next packet. So this is something that you've been doing before. This is just one meeting later than before.
So that will require us as a commission to vote on this once again, just as we did at the last meeting. So I will entertain a motion to approve for final findings Canby Utility VAR 21-03.
Mr. Commissioner.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to the State Street multifamily DR 21-04. And I will entertain a motion for approval on that as well.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Oh, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Is that what we were looking to do on that, Ryan?
Yes.
John? Okay, good. And that's what we will be doing moving forward instead of at the end of the meeting.
Right, and I think this will be a positive for the planning commission because I think you'll see in the final findings if there was additional conversation or decisions or something else made that those findings are going to exactly reflect what this group has done. So, thank you.
Okay, I have not had a chance to review the minutes from the June 14th meeting. Has anybody else?
I have.
Mr. Chair, this is Commissioner Mills. I have.
Okay, then I will not be voting on this since I have not had a chance to read those minutes. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the June 14th meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from the June 14th meeting as written.
Seconded.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? And I will abstain. Okay, there is no new business. And now we will move on to our agenda items.
Chair
Right.
Savory, do you mind if I say something really quick?
No, let's think about that. Can we vote on that, Ryan?
You are going to hear a lot from me this evening, so I apologize in advance.
Okay.
But I did want to just let the people that wanted to speak or are going to speak on Canby South that it is the second item, so it may be a while. We just wanted to warn them that there is another item before that. So.
Okay, thank you. So our first order of business is the Dragonberry Produce DR 21-03, LLA 21-03. And we will consider a site and design review application from Dragonberry Produce. Request approval to construct a second phase of their existing produce distribution business operating at 386 South Sequoia Parkway. To facilitate the proposed expansion, the applicant proposed to consolidate their existing property with an adjacent property, which is at 380 South Sequoia Parkway. The proposed warehouse building would include a drive-in cooler, net processing facility, and office space. This matter before us requires a public hearing. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or other land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time.
Good.
How about Zoom?
That's terrific.
I can say that I drive by it
You're on Zoom?
numerous times, but I'm going to
You're
participate.
on Zoom?
Who do we have here? Okay.
I think whoever's hosting needs to mute all, and then you can unmute yourself, John.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not muted. So the public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll have the staff report. Who's going to be giving the staff report tonight? Ryan?
Chair Savory, I will be giving both of them. This is Ryan.
Okay, great. Thank you. After the staff report, there will be questions by the commissioners. And then I will open the public hearing for testimony. First will be the applicant, and he will have not more than 15 minutes. Other proponents, not more than 5 minutes.
Honey?
Opponents, not more than 5 minutes. And then rebuttal by the applicant, if necessary, not more than 10 minutes. At that time, I will close the public hearing. Questions, if any, by the other commissioners, and then discussion, and then we will make a decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain. This will be the only notice of that date that you will receive. Any questions? Okay, Ryan, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Chair Savory. Can everyone see my screen share? right now it should be a piece of the agenda up on the screen.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good evening, Chair Savory and members of the Planning Commission. The first item that will be heard tonight is a expansion of Dragonberry Produce. This is City Files DR 21-03, which is a design review, and LLA 21-03, which is a lot line adjustment application. As always, we like to start with this slide, just highlighting the fact that the staff report is always based on the criteria in the city code that apply. These are listed on the screen. Those range from general procedures to the zoning and overlay zoning of the parcels, and then all the chapters relating to development standards, and then others mostly having to do with procedures. And in this case, also the lot line adjustment has land division regulations that apply. So the existing conditions of this site are, it is located in near the center of our industrial park. It's located along Sequoia Parkway where it meets Walnut Street. It's currently 2 parcels. The larger one is currently hosting the original Dragonberry Produce building facility. It's surrounded by a mixture of light industrial uses. Columbia Distributing is to the northeast. To the southeast is where Caruso Produce is just recently finished construction. And then Alpha Sense was just finished being constructed to the immediate west. And it is zoned M1 light industrial, like most of the parcels in that vicinity. So this is just a street view photo of the site. I think a lot of you have been by here. You can see the existing businesses on the right, and then the business would expand to the west of where their existing business is. So the proposed project is an expansion of an existing business. The new building would be a warehouse with a drive-in cooler, nut processing facilities, and some ancillary office space for administering their business. Outside the building, there would be 33 parking spaces, 8 loading docks. The building would match the existing building's design, which is quite a nice building, I think. The proposed project does propose to have unirrigated landscaping, which is a little bit different than some of our other projects in town. But that is something that the current business is doing, and so that way it would be an expansion of that concept. And then lastly, there is a lot line adjustment because while the existing business is on one parcel, there's a smaller parcel that's part of a subdivided piece of land to the immediate west, and they will be combining one of those quadrants of that subdivision with their existing site. This is a site plan of the proposed project. And then I've added just some highlights just for clarity. I've got 3 arrows showing where the access points onto the public streets are. The 2 on the right are existing driveways already used by Dragonberry. The one on the left is a shared driveway that already exists, that's partially constructed, that's shared by the 4 parcels there. So Dragonberry would be one of the 4 sharing that driveway. And then I added the red line there just so you can see that the proposed building would be situated where the existing lot line is right now. But like I said, the project includes a lot line adjustment to combine and consolidate those parcels. And then once that happens, obviously there wouldn't be any setback issues after the lot line adjustment. So these are some elevations of the building. Like I said before, it's designed to match their previous existing building. I will note the applicant team does have their own slides after my presentation, and they have some prettier exhibits. So getting into the content of the staff report, again, these are the criteria that we base our staff report and analysis on. And then I'm just going to give you some highlights of the consistency with criteria that was analyzed in the staff report. So first of all, a traffic letter was composed for the project, and that's based on our thresholds for doing a full-blown traffic study versus for smaller projects. If they're going to generate below a certain amount of trips, then the traffic consultant does a different level of analysis. This would have approximately 49 total daily trips, but those would be spread throughout the day or anticipated to be spread throughout the day. So the impacts on intersections in the area are pretty negligible. The off-street parking and loading, the requirements in our code are met by this project. We do require bicycle parking based on the square footage. It would be 3 spaces. That wasn't shown on the original exhibit, but I know that the project team is aware of this, and they've already said that going forward, all their exhibits will show those 3 spots, so they were aware of that. The zoning is in the light industrial zone, and it's also in our Canby Pioneer industrial area overlay zone. There's some overlap there with development standards, but this project, as discussed in the staff report, did meet all those requirements. Signs, we have received a signage application from the applicant, but that came after the land use application, so that will be processed separately. So I just wanted to note that this land use approval doesn't cover the signage. From a site design standpoint, the notable thing that I mentioned earlier was the landscaping. It is non-standard for things in town to not be irrigated. And we did have a condition, which actually included some wording from the applicant team. They did offer that if in the event that the landscaping that's not irrigated did fail, that they would install permanent irrigation in that event. And then with the lot line adjustment, regulations in our code, most of those regulations apply. Most lot line adjustments, they often create new lots, but that's not the case here. It's a consolidation of lots. So there's really nothing that, no regulations that really affected the project. So it was consistent with those. There were 34 conditions of approval identified by staff. Most of these are standard conditions, so they're ones that are applied to every project, including the next one this evening. Just a couple that are more specific, tailored to the project. Numbers 2 through 4 just have to do with the right-of-way improvements. This project happens to be on 2 streets that are mostly improved, but they would need some restriping and street trees and sidewalks. So those conditions spell that out. Provision of bicycle racks, we just included that as a condition just because it wasn't on the original site plan. And the condition I mentioned about the irrigation, that's number 18. And then the last one I noted is just, so I didn't mention this before, but the applicant and the business have left one area where they could expand for a 3rd phase at a later date. And city just asked via this condition that there be some vegetation planted there for erosion control's sake. Public comments, we did not receive any on this item. And so based on the applications received and the analysis in the staff report, planning staff recommend approval of applications DR 21-03 and LLA 21-03. And Chair Savory, you are muted.
Into myself, which I'm often accused of doing anyway. So, any questions or comments from other commissioners? And as usual, we'll start with Mr. Mills, Commissioner Mills.
Mr. Chair, I have no questions.
Okay, great. Commissioner Trundy, any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
Great. Commissioner Heeb, any questions from you?
Oh, yeah. I know Dragonberry is right there on Walnut Street. Are we any closer with the traffic safety plan to know what our status on the Walnut Street expansion is?
Well, the Walnut extension beyond First Street, it is still in the works, and so they're still doing engineering work on it.
Roger.
That your only question, Commissioner Heeb?
Yes, that was it.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Pat?
No, everything makes sense, and I have no questions or have no problems.
Okay. Michael, any questions from you?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. I do have one question. So it says that there will be 49 daily bike trips. Did I forget Commissioner Boatwright? Did I forget you, Larry?
I'm used to it, John. That's all right.
Oh, man. This old
No
guy's got to stay
questions.
together.
No-
Sorry about that.
That's all right. No questions, John.
Okay. All right. So sorry about that. Okay. Well, I do have a question, and it says that there are going to be 49 daily trips. Is that in addition to the current trip count, or is that in total?
That's in addition. That's just for what's being added by the project.
Okay. Do we know what the trip count is currently? Or
I don't. Kevin from DKS, I'm not sure if that's something that you are aware of.
I am trying to find it as the question is coming up. I can give it to you in a second.
well, while he's looking that up, are those trips going to be mostly passenger vehicles, workers, or will that be vans and light trucks bringing in product?
Let me pull that up. Kevin might also have that, but let me pull that up.
Yeah, I can tell you that. So that's total trips. So that includes trucks and vehicles. So a portion of that is going to be trucks, but most of it is going to be passenger vehicles.
Okay. People coming and going to work.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Well, I have no further questions then. Are there, and let's move along then to the applicant. And who is going to be in charge of speaking for Dragonberry?
I will. I'm David Hyman with Decca Architects.
Okay. If you could state your address, that would be great as well.
2842 Southeast Berkeley Place, Portland,
Okay. Thank you.
97202.
Okay. Your time to talk.
All right. Thank you. So I'm the architect for the project that you're reviewing today. And I was the architect for Amy's original building back in 2013. Ryan did a good job of kind of explaining the basics, the details of what we're proposing. And I wanted to just sort of flesh out some of the goals and visions that Amy has for this project. At the time that I met her back in 2012, I was just immensely impressed with her drive and her vision for her business, but also her passion for good design and environmental stewardship. And you can see that in everything she does, from her branding, her packaging, architecture, and landscape. That sense of design and commitment to the environment is really evident in everything she does. So this is an image of the original building, the building that's there now. And you can see its distinctive architecture, beautiful landscaping, with its Japanese garden and drought-tolerant plants, which is why we're not we're proposing not to use irrigation, and you can see it's held up really well. So it's evident that the kind of care and the type of plant selection that we've made has proven to work for the last 8 years. So I'm sure you'd agree it's a cut above the kind of typical industrial architecture, and that's because of Amy's vision. Next slide, please. So this is back in 2013. This was the Japanese garden when it first opened. Since then, the bamboo has grown up and has filled out with other plants, have matured, and it's even more beautiful now. Next slide, please. The project received its a LEED Silver designation. LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And at the time, it was the first LEED Silver certified distribution center in the Northwest, which was not easy to achieve for that building type. Warehouses don't use a lot of energy to begin with, and the certification process requires that you exceed that efficiency by a significant amount. So it was quite an achievement to arrive at that certification. Next slide, please. From the time she moved into this building back in 2013 to today, her business has doubled. She has really cemented her reputation as a successful businesswoman. But I don't know how many of you know this about her, what a great ambassador of goodwill she is for the city of Canby, not just in the region, but really internationally. Next slide, please. Her business model centers around representing Northwest and California growers of premium fruits and vegetables. She helps them promote and package all of these beautiful products and connects them not only to local stores, but also to her international markets where she has these relationships in Asia and South America, including Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, and Ecuador. So while she's doing that, simultaneously, she's importing premium fruit and vegetables from many of those same countries to the Northwest. And in fact, in April, the Oregon Department of Agriculture awarded her, and I should read this carefully, the Global Trade Midsize Business Award in honor of her significant contributions to the state's economic vitality and quality of life. So she's really a hidden gem in this community. Next slide, please. So this is a perspective of the new building that we're proposing. It's very similar in design to the previous one. And because of this explosive growth, she's essentially doubling the capacity of her facility, double the size of the original one. And so it has many of the same design features. The intent is to really create a campus, a campus feel that is consistent throughout. Next slide. So here's a site plan, kind of a rendered site plan. And as we're developing this current expansion for her business, she's already thinking about future expansion on the vacant property that Ryan mentioned to the west. Her motto is "the sky's the limit," and I believe her when she says that, because she's certainly proven it to be true. So stay tuned for that expansion in the future. Next slide, please. Here's the schedule. So just to give you a quick overview without getting into too much detail, in about 2 weeks, we'll be submitting the site package for permit review. And pending approval of that and our site and design review application tonight, which is in your hands, Amy's preparing for the groundbreaking ceremony on August 26th, a very critical date. Construction is anticipated to take about 8 months, with a ribbon cutting in April of 2022. And next slide, please. I'm sure it will be as festive as the one that she threw back in 2013 for the groundbreaking of that original building. Among those attending this one on August 26th will be the Vietnamese consul, the director of the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the mayor of Canby, the local council members, a Port of Portland commissioner, and local growers. So it's going to be very well attended with a lot of dignitaries. So we appreciate your support throughout this process and helping us make this a successful project for the city of Canby. Really, the planners have been great to work with. Ryan's been great. And Amy would like to invite you all to this groundbreaking ceremony on August 26th. I hope you can attend. So please let her know if you can. Next slide, please. And finally, we just want to thank you for all the great support that we've had in bringing the project to the point that it is now. And we look forward to a successful project.
You're muted again.
You got to get past that. So any questions from any commissioners on this project?
No, but I do just want to call out, I really greatly appreciate the amount of care and effort that has been put into the landscape for this construction. Being a horticulturist and a landscaper by study, I think that more developers should put more effort into the landscapes they put in the city. It would go a long ways to helping the future of this community. So I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you, Jason. Anybody else like to?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Yes.
And this goes back to a few meetings ago when we had a work session, and we talked about the applicant bringing their A game to discuss projects with us. And
Yes.
this is something that could be used as an example of what we want to see when we hear about the project and see how it fits in not only to the space, but into the community. So my kudos to this presentation. This was very, very well done.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Trundy. Anybody else want to make an observation? Okay, then we will move along to other proponents. If there are any that would like to speak on behalf of this, in favor of this project. Okay, hearing none. Are there any, do we have anybody that would like to speak in opposition to this project? Ryan, anybody?
I'm not aware of anyone that's online that's looking to speak on this item, but Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't think there's anyone in opposition that I'm aware of either. If there is, this would be the time to say it.
Yeah.
Actually, my name is Sean Collinson. Hopefully you can see my picture up there. My wife and I are here together. We actually just kind of had a couple of questions.
We can see you. We can, if you will state both of your names and address.
It's Sean and Julie Collinson, Collinson. And the address is 23905 South Blount, Blount Road here in Canby.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I'll turn it over to my wife really quickly as she was writing some notes down.
Yes.
Okay.
This kind of goes along with our actual proposed testimony for the other project. Having been a member of the Transportation Safety Committee and understanding the value of traffic studies, everyone had mentioned that there is negligible traffic impact with this project, but it is unclear that whether or not 49 additional traffic movements throughout the day would be impacted in that particular area, which is quite interesting to hear because given my experience in that area, that you're adding another 49 to and fro traffic routes through that area, which is already impacted negatively through the other addition of other buildings. How are you to say that that is negligible when we haven't necessarily taken in consideration of all the impact of all the other facilities in that area, given Stanton, given Columbia, given your proposed expansion in the annexed or other version of the distribution center plan, and considering that as well in this plan? So it seems that we're just continuing to add rather than creating a better infrastructure for the amount of traffic flow that you are creating by these proposals of expansions of current businesses.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to say? I'm sure that the applicant will have an opportunity here in a minute to talk about that, address that issue.
Mm-hmm. And then the second question was you were explaining something with the overlap of reports. And that seemed to be kind of a questionable area for me. But what is an overlap with reports? What are these? That was not expanded upon either. And that was brought up by the Mr. Potter.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Do you mean when I was talking about the overlay zone?
No, you just said something about the overlap of reports, and there was no expansion upon what that meant. So I'm confused on what that actually means. But there's an overlap of reports.
I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
Again, that's where we're at. We're kind of confused on what that means.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't remember saying that. Which doesn't mean that I didn't, but I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
Well, these items are recorded, are they not? So that should be something that could go back and we could try to determine what that was.
Yeah, these are recorded. Yeah, but I mean, in general, there's no. I mean, these projects were analyzed separately. There's separate staff reports. There's separate traffic reports, and they were analyzed separately. So they're certainly they weren't lumped together anyway in any way.
Mm-hmm.
So were these traffic related issues though? Were they actually built upon the Walnut Street extension already being done when it's still in the planning phase? Because it sounds like we're having a lot more larger vehicles coming into this area, and there's really no egress and points for them to get out of town other than down the main roadways that we already have.
Right, and Kevin, you might want to. I don't know if you have any.
I'm Kevin Cherrick from DKS. I'm the traffic consultant for the city. I just wanted to make sure it was okay for me to step in here, but I can explain some of your questions. Regarding the traffic generation of 49 trips. I mean, you have to keep in mind that that's throughout the day. That's dispersed over several hours of the day, and a lot of these trips are happening off peak hours. So a lot of the congestion that you see, the trips on the system, that's all happening at times when a lot of these trips are going to be distributed during different hours. And another thing to keep in mind with this project is that they're contributing towards the city's system development charges. And within those, that's contributing towards improvements that are enhancing the system and circulation in this area, including what is known now as the Walnut Street extension. This project is contributing towards that and advancing that improvement to enhance the intersections in this area. So it is addressing those issues. You're back to your other question. I think maybe what Ryan may have mentioned is some of these studies are overlapped on each other. So when we analyze it, we do include these trips, and that may come up later with the project that's after this one, where these trips are actually layered on top of the analysis. So we are considering the factors of what happens when all of these projects are layered on top of each other, but we can get to that later.
That generates two more questions for me with the enhancing systems. So having been here and again, part of the transportation system or committee, the systems haven't been enhanced. And so when are these proposed enhanced systems going to be created, as well as when are they going to be considered for public comment? Because currently the systems haven't been enhanced. And we also know that with the Oregon Department of Transportation, the systems haven't been enhanced on 99E as well. And then in addition to this Walnut Street extension and the current status of the extension by Caruso, that has been pretty much stalemated. What are the plans and how are those going to be proven to be in place prior to this expansion consideration? Again, we're talking about a conundrum of traffic that's already being, it's visual daily. And so with considering additional distribution sites and more traffic, these systems haven't been enhanced. So wouldn't it be in our best interest to enhance these systems prior to considering expansion of things and buildings again before we're going to consider the traffic addition or the system enhancements before we decide to increase the size or the space for adding more distribution type sites?
Yeah, and that's a good point. But I want to mention that the Walnut Street analysis is a part of the TSP now. The whole system has been in this entire area has been analyzed with those trips. So all of these trips, all these potential projects have been previously analyzed with that project, and the outcome of that project was a 2035 horizon when that project is needed to alleviate potential issues at the Sequoia and other intersections in this area. So that analysis has been completed.
The analysis has been completed, but you said it was 2035.
Yeah, that is the year of expected need of that project. And you should keep in mind that the 49 daily trips in the peak hours, so the PM peak and the AM peak, which is when the people travel most on the system, this project is generating less than 5 trips in each of those. So that's very minimal amount of trips that are added to these peak hours.
Chair Savory, this is Jason, if I may speak.
Yes, move forward.
So this is. I just want to provide a little bit of extra perspective here. 15 years ago, I served on the industrial park planning or sounding board, essentially. And I just want to, and this was going to be part of my comments in the next applicant, was that for a decade or more now, this industrial park has been planned to be built in this area. And most of the streets that you travel on to go through the industrial park were not there before. They have been put in as this industrial park has grown out. It has grown out faster than what was projected. And the Walnut Street connector is running behind because some of that property is not in the industrial park. And so therefore it undergoes other requirements in order to put this street through. So that is causing some problems there. But as far as these buildings are built in the industrial park, it has been projected for the future when this has completely been built out for these streets to handle this volume. And as these individuals build these buildings out and pay their SDCs into the city, that coupled with what we've done through the taxes generated from the urban renewal district are what build that infrastructure. There may be some pinch as that continues, but ultimately that will be alleviated as the industrial park gets built out completely and goes from there. That is the whole point of creating this industrial park, was for it to be self-sufficient and bring this tax base into the community.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Jason. For that perspective, that was very helpful. Let's go back to the testimony of the opponents.
So thank you, Jason, for bringing that to the attention of us. However, when the gentleman before who's doing the traffic studies stated that it's not going to be done until 2035, let's talk about how the arterial roadways are being utilized to support such traffic in this current state. So we're talking 14 years from now. But what are you doing currently to alleviate that traffic and to, I guess, save the current structure of the roads, which we have more information to talk about with the next distribution center proposal, because now these arterial roadways are being utilized, which are not in the city, by the way. They're county roads. And how are our city dollars being utilized to support those roads, which now these distribution centers are currently utilizing for their traffic to and fro? So please explain to me an expansion of how that is being proposed and utilized to make it more efficient in the next 14 years.
So Chair Savory, do you mind if I think Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when he's talking about 2035, that's the trigger year at which that facility has been analyzed to be needed. That doesn't mean the facility is gonna wait that long. In fact, I believe it's on our capital improvement plan for the next 5-year window. And so that's why our city engineers have been working on the site acquisition and engineering portions of the Walnut Street extension in particular. And so that's not something that's not something that's waiting until 2035 for sure. Malino, which is a county road, but I believe there are plans to bring that into the city. That has been upgraded as projects come through. So Shakespeare, which is Columbia Distributing, and Caruso Produce, and Stanton Furniture have all done half street frontage improvements along that. And then the next hearing item tonight, you'll see also that frontage improvements would be required of that project as well. And so that's where part of at least the roads that are on the edge. There obviously are some state facilities that are experiencing more congestion along 99. We certainly are aware of that. I know next year ODOT is doing some improvement projects along 99 through the middle of Canby. Kevin, does that all sound correct?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Ryan, about that. And yeah, it's important to note that these projects are in the city's TSP and also your STC system. So at STC fees, so every time a project comes in, they're contributing towards these improvements that are actually occurring concurrent with the development in most cases.
Right. So every project that comes through is paying system development charges. And so are there some projects listed in our TSP, which is our transportation system plan? We probably didn't say that, I'm sorry. Are there some projects listed in our TSP that come later than a lot of people in town would like? I think the answer is a definite yes. There's always some natural lag to infrastructure projects, but our ability to build those projects is bolstered by the SDCs that are collected as part of these projects that are built in the industrial park.
This is Jason, real quick. I think this might provide some clarification. This is a question that I actually have on my list. This is for Ryan and Kevin. When these developers build out these sites and do their street improvements as part of the development, are those improvements based on the county street requirements or based on the city standards for a street?
It depends on the location. I think on Malino, I believe, and Dawn was speaking with our public works folks with this on this today, but I believe Malino is being updated to the county standard.
Okay, well, if that's the case then, and you can put a pin in this, that is something we need to look at, because as was mentioned by our opponent, I, being a streets person here, have a real concern with the city being saddled with these streets that the county owns and will give us no money to repair. So I would like to see that if these people if we're going to be building out these developments in this industrial park on these county streets, on these county roads, we have got to do something so that when they put that development in, it is brought up to a city standard, not the county's.
Commissioner Padden, just quickly, that is in fact correct. In terms of Malino, that standard actually at the county, that urban standard is actually higher than the cities. So just as a clarifying point.
Okay, that's good. I just want to make sure, because that is one of the questions, as the opponent, that is one of the questions I have about this. But that sounds good.
And I think just one more piece, just for the good of the order, not to dive too deeply, but it might be helpful, Kevin, to talk a little bit about the transportation system plan and how that's being measured for each project consistent with the standards of that. Just a very brief statement might be helpful for understanding.
Yes, so the transportation system plan is basically it's a forecast of the growth in the entire city, so the entire urban growth boundary of the city. So that is those are turned into vehicle trips on the system throughout the city. And as part of that plan, you develop a whole list of projects that are needed to support that growth. And those projects are implemented through, oftentimes they're implemented through development review, which is what you're seeing today. And sometimes they're implemented through larger scale TSP projects. But that's how these projects are developed. And then they turn into your system development charges, which is what new development contributes. So they're the ones paying for these improvements that are necessary to serve the trips generated by their development. So that's basically a short summary of kind of the process and how the TSP projects turn into implementation through these new developments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Typically, I like to allow everybody to kind of get their point of view out there. Do we have any more, particularly from the opponents here? Have your questions been adequately answered for the moment?
Actually, no. And again, because again, having experience with the Transportation Safety Committee, I understand SDCs, I understand TSP. What I'm more concerned is that our TSPs are not in line with all of the systems that are in place currently. And that includes ODOT, that includes county and city. So continuous expansion on our local community city level is not in alignment with ODOT or the county. And proof in the pudding in this particular situation is the fact that these businesses are utilizing these other county roads. And it's not just Malino, it's Haynes, it is Blount, it is Township, it is all of these other roads that are county owned to a point. And those TSPs are not in alignment with that. Regardless of SDCs being generated, we are not having that communication in a sense that we're creating a system where the flow is adequate for the amount of traffic and flow that we are adding to the system in itself. So that's where where my questions are, and in opposition to this particular enhancement of this distribution facility, in addition to the one that you're going to secondly propose, because we are not considering all of these systems at this time. And unless something has changed in the last, few months, I'm not sure where we are in that particular area.
Kevin, could you address adopted levels of service? That would be helpful, I think.
So, and as part going back to the TSP, a part of that process is including. The ODOT's system planning for the highway is done at the TSP level for the city. So the city's TSP includes projects along the highway to support growth that's happening in the city, and also that's just traveling through the city that may not have a destination there. So there are several projects in the TSP that are serving that purpose. And then, I'm sorry, Don, I forgot what your question was. I kind of got off topic there.
No, I think you're answering part of it. But the adopted levels of service, I think that's the critical question here, is that what is the metric is what's being asked? What is the measure? And I think that's part of the question here is what is being measured and what is it being measured to? And I think that's the question that's being asked.
So yeah, okay. So there are different service quality levels that agencies have. So the city has their own for their intersections under their control. The county has their own for their intersections under their control, and then the state has one for the highway through the city. So each of these traffic studies in this case, and the city's TSP has to meet those standards. So that's what the level of improvement that you're doing at each of those intersections. So on the highway, there's a certain quality of service that you have to have during the peak hour to meet. And if you don't meet it in your system plan, then you have to develop a project to address that and meet that need. So that's how your TSP is developed. It's meeting the standards for each of those agencies. So in that case, you're meeting the state standards along 99E, you're meeting the county standards along their facilities, and then you're meeting the city standards along their facilities. And you're developing a whole holistic set of projects that address all those needs.
And Kevin, each project's being measured against all those items you just mentioned.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One question.
Okay.
One question that I had, I actually work for the county sheriff's office here in Clackamas. And so when I heard that Molino Road, we were going to push Molino out and I guess increase the urban growth or decrease the urban growth boundary and take that into the city, that was a curiosity of mine. And then the other one where you say that the county's roadways actually have a higher standard than the city's, I would tend to disagree because the county roadways aren't required to have sidewalks and things like that.
I'm sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but that's getting way off the point of this specific
Yes.
Yes.
situation. And we need to rein it in because I honestly don't want to be on this until midnight tonight.
Yes.
I
I'm
agree.
just about ready to step in. So typically opposition points of view are given about 5 minutes. We've gone really over that. I know you'll be talking over the next project. So let's give the applicant an opportunity to kind of rebut some of these things as he has a moment for that. So can we, David, are you still there? Do you have anything you'd like to say? Okay, great.
Well, I mean, I can't really comment in the level of detail that others have about the overall transportation system around the site and what the plans are for the future. But I would just make the comment that this project is relatively low impact as projects go, with 49 trips per day and 5 trips during peak hours. So it's not going to be burdening the existing system all that much. And, you know, it's not a retail center. It's a distribution center, and it has, you know, very little public access to and from the site. So it really is a pretty low impact project. And, you know, as somebody mentioned, not only are we paying SDC fees to help support this overall system, we're also building sidewalks and putting in street trees. And so, you know, we're doing our part, I guess I would say, for that. And, you know, I think the rest of you can probably comment much better than I on just how it impacts the overall system. But for the immediate area, I think it's very low impact.
Thank you. Any
Chair
questions?
Savory.
Yes.
Yeah, could I jump in here real quick? I guess this question could go for Don or Ryan. Do you guys know when we are due for another new traffic safety plan?
Transportation system plan, Commissioner Heed, is that the question?
Yes.
We are planning to have that started with a consultant in 2022, hopefully around this time next year. There's a couple things in play that need to happen before that. And that's there's an economic opportunity assessment, housing needs analysis, and housing needs analysis, which has a buildable lands assessment to it, along with the economic opportunity assessment, which has a buildable lands element to it. Those will precede the transportation system plan, which is in need of update. It's out of date, but it is being looked at, as Kevin mentioned, for each project. So that's going to be updated holistically, which will look at the entirety of the city. It'll also look at the future of the city as well for, you know, if there would be any expansions to the boundary of the city.
All right. Yeah, because I can completely empathize with the Collinsons with that whole the industrial park being built around their property. And I'm sure watching this over the years, this one project may only add, like 2 trips an hour. But cumulatively, with all these buildings going, it's increased quite a bit. And I know I'm constantly on the hearing people complain about the traffic on Walnut Street. And I've been following the Walnut Street extension for quite a few years, and I don't quite understand what's holding it up so long, because it's a definite need, especially with our next presentation coming up. It's what is an estimate on that, or why is it taking so long?
I do know that the right-of-way is being acquired for that, and the next hearing, which I won't go into at this point, we'll talk about funding for that as well. And that is something that's on the immediate horizon. I don't have an exact timing, but the city wants to complete it as well to make sure that that connectional system is there.
Right.
More broadly, I think, I think that there is a challenge as growth happens. People see additional congestion. We understand that. It's measured against a level of service. I think those are adopted standards by the city. And I think the community is growing and there is additional congestion, but it is being measured and looked at based on the standards of the city. And that's probably the last thing I need to say on that.
All right. Yeah. All right. I was just curious. I was under the understanding that piece of property where the Walnut Street extension has been purchased by the city. Is that true? Or
I know that the right-of-way negotiations were happening. I don't know if the acquisition has happened, but the city is very interested in making sure that project happens as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that was all I had. Thank you.
Just to add a little bit, I know part of it is the land acquisition. It would traverse a number of properties there has to be some level of participation. And then there are some topological and environmental constraints through there. There's actually some wetland areas in there. So my understanding is that's part of it. There was an original alignment that connected up to another spot, and the alignment has shifted because of those constraints.
Yeah, I believe they've taken out all the curves and tried the most modern or up-to-date plan is a pretty straight line versus going through that little pond wetland area. But it just seems like it's taking a long time. But I don't. I can empathize with the Collinsons, so that's all I have.
Any other comment from other commissioners?
John, this is Larry Boatwright.
Hey, Larry.
I have one question. Is the Ott Road extension over there by the tavern and the Walnut extension the same?
Yes. So the change in alignment that I was just speaking of, that's the difference. So originally, it was planned in the TSP to connect to Auto Road, which is that little gravel private drive that goes to a few properties. As they got closer to doing the land acquisition and the engineering, they realized there was way more constraints with that alignment. In particular, there's actually quite a bit of a grade change there. And so the newer conceptual alignment would end up closer to, I'm not sure what it's called right now, but whatever the business, the restaurant building that's there, which is a flatter area. So the TSP has been, we have officially City Council amended the TSP to reflect the new alignment, which allows the city to use SDCs on that project.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. At this time, I will close the public hearing portion of this and since there are no further questions, we can move right into making a decision. I will entertain a motion to approve the Dragonberry Produce Project DR 21-03 LLA 21-03.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We will now move to the second item on the agenda here, which is the Canby South project. And that's DR 21-01/VAR 21-01. This will require a hearing, a public hearing, and all questions on this must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received, both for and against, shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or other land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Does any member of the audience, whoever's online, have any questions for any counselor or regarding ex parte contact or the conflict of interest? I meant commissioner, sorry about that. Okay, the public hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll have the staff report, which Ryan will be giving us in a minute. Then we will have questions by commissioners. Then I will open the meeting to for public testimony. The applicant will have not more than 15 minutes. Proponents, not more than 5 minutes. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes. And rebuttal by the applicant, if necessary, not more than 10 minutes. At that time, I will close the public hearing. Questions, if any, by the hearing body, and a decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Now, I understand that there are a few people that will be speaking in opposition to this project, so I am going to, as chair, be timing everybody here. So we're going to stick to our time schedule of 15 minutes for the applicant, other proponents, not more than 5 minutes, opponents, not more than 5 minutes, and then rebuttal by the applicant, not more than 10 minutes. And then we'll move forward. So let's start with you, Ryan, and the staff report.
Great, thank you, Chair Savory. Can everyone still see my screen with the slides up? Great. I was looking at Jason Pett, and I don't know why, but if you're nodding, then I just take that as a yes. So again, this is a slide that I had in the last one. We always like to remind everyone the staff report is based on criteria in the code. These criteria are mostly the same as the last project. It's in the same zones. There is a variance, a major variance with this project, so those code criteria apply. Believe otherwise they're the same. Existing conditions. This is the largest available parcel in our industrial park. It is 2 tax lots, but 1 developable legal lot. It is zoned M1 light industrial. It's out at the southeast edge of the industrial park. So if you see on the map on your screen, or the aerial photo rather, it is surrounded by Sequoia on the west, Township on the north, and South Malino on the east. And then the railroad tracks kind of travel diagonally along its southern boundary. And it has been used for agricultural purposes historically, so it is vacant and just flat. So this is the zoning of our industrial park. You can see those 2 parcels with the arrows. Those are the light industrial parcels that the proposed site is located on. This is a Google Street View showing the site. This is looking in a southeastern direction towards the center of the site. You can see American Steels on the right there. Township and Sequoia meet there. So that is the site. You can see there's farm uses in the background. So the proposed project is a concrete tilt-up warehouse distribution facility that has been designed to accommodate e-commerce uses, electronic commerce. So no specific user or tenant has been identified in the applicant materials. They, of course, can, and the applicant is here so they can speak to you about the range of potential tenants that they've spoken to. At build out, the building would feature approximately 791,000 square feet. That includes 683,000 square feet with the first phase, and then they've left room for a future second phase that would be about 108 additional 1,000 square feet. Along with the building, they have proposed 637 vehicular parking spaces. Those are the ones for employees, with space for 100 additional spaces for the future phase. They have 223 trailer parking spaces, 124 loading docks, if that gives you kind of a sense of the scale. And then there would be approximately 20,000 square foot of ancillary office space. Obviously, that could change a little bit based on the programming inside the building. And then the building height does vary by elevation. We're going to get a little bit into this in the code compliance or code consistency section of this presentation. But our maximum height for this zone and the overlay zone is 45 feet. But this building would have, it's a large building and it has varying elevations along it. We'll get into that, but it would max out at 52 feet, 10 inches that would just occur on one side of the building. This is a site plan, illustrative site plan of the project. You can see the building is located pretty much in the middle of the site. This is north is to the left. So the passenger car employee parking is there along Township on the left. And then the trailer parking and all the loading docks are along the two sides of the building on the Malino side and the Sequoia side. You can see that on the far right is the space left over for a future phase. The bottom left is their stormwater treatment basin, which everything in Canby is required to be treated on site. So that's where that comes from, all stormwater. There's 4 entrances or access points on Township Road, including the main truck in and out point, which is shown on the lower left. And then the passenger car employee parking area, there's 3 in and outs there. There's also 2 access points on Malino, and I believe the applicant is looking to gate those so they wouldn't be used regularly, but they can correct me if that's incorrect. This is an aerial that I put together. The applicant has a better one, but I did this one just to highlight where the access points were that I was just talking about. So you can see this one's right side up. So you can see that there's 4 access points on Township and 2 on Malino. And the building is located in the middle of the site, which is significant for some of the other things we're going to talk about. And this is aerial that the applicant had, an exhibit that the applicant had put together. So kind of showing the overall site in its context with the industrial park. You can see Columbia Distributing is the other large building to the north of Malino. And then the center of town is on the left side of the slide. These are some elevation renderings of the site. You can see the north and east elevations. The one on the top is showing what the main front facade with the employee entrance would look like. And then the one at the bottom shows a lot of the loading docks and truck and trailer parking area. And then that's another perspective of the front on the bottom. And then on the top is the other side showing the loading docks. And this is a 3D model that the applicant team put together, showing what it would look like once the trees were mature. And you can see this is the main entrance proposed along Township. So when staff analyzes projects. Like I said before, it's based on the criteria, and so that is how the staff report is organized. So first of all, we do have Kevin here from DKS, so he may assist with some questions, but I'll just do high level. This was discussed in the staff report and the attachments, which included the traffic study, but DKS studied 2 versions of the project as proposed, and then just to be conservative, also a high intensity version of the project. The first version of the project generates about 1,400 daily trips, and then the high intensity version generates about 1,600. And then you can see that 157 and 182 respectively are the truck trips of those. So a lot of the trips would be employee passenger car trips, obviously, because there would be a lot of people potentially working in this building. And that is 11%. The truck trips are 11%, I should have said that. Consistency with the code criteria related to the traffic study. So DKS did a traffic study. With or without the proposed project, there'd be 3 intersections on 99E. And I think this kind of gets to some of the conversation we had earlier. At peak hours, there'd be significant contribution to these intersections exceeding standards. And so that would be Highway 99 at Ivy at the PM peak hour period, 99 at Pine Street at the PM peak hour as well, and then 99 at Haynes Road at both peak hours. And I should note that Haynes is on the way to Oregon City, so that intersection is obviously outside the city. Because these intersections are where they are, there are some obstacles to doing improvements at these intersections. The first is Highway 99 at Ivy. Obviously, that's a heavily urbanized location. It's right across from downtown. That's not a intersection that you could easily widen to increase capacity. The other one is Haynes Road. There's obviously obstacles to this. It's not in the city's jurisdiction. But in general, these are some programmatic, like regional traffic impacts. And at the request of the city, DKS performed a supplementary analysis, and this was included in the packet along with the traffic study, about exploring how this project's significant generation of trips, as I went over, would contribute their proportional share of the improvements that needs to be done at these locations. And so DKS determined, and Kevin may speak on this later, is that an in lieu fee of $547,200 is considered proportional to the project's impacts to these system-wide impacts along 99. And because of the obstacles to doing improvements at some of these locations, the Walnut Street Extension project that the city is planning, that we were talking about earlier, is considered a project that will have corridor-wide benefits. And so by this project, because you can't just widen, add a bunch of lanes, obviously, I'm not saying that's what the specific improvement would be required at Ivy, but that this is a way of compensating for those trips on the 99 corridor. And because the whole premise of the Walnut extension is to relieve Sequoia and some of the other roads and spread out the traffic more, and also, and in general, create a more direct connection from the industrial park to the highway. Off-street parking and loading. The proposed project proposes to have 66 fewer parking spots than explicitly required by the code. And so I created this table. This is also in the staff report. But the required spaces for the total build out of the project is 811 spaces. The project applicant has proposed to reduce that based on the type of use that they are trying to bring. And so they have submitted a range of materials to support their argument, including parking requirements in other jurisdictions nearby for this type of use, along with documentation from potential users that they've been speaking to that would require dramatically lower than 811 spaces. And so city staff acknowledged that this is a relatively sizable reduction from what is required. There is a large amount of documentation supplied by the applicant. So this is something that they are requesting approval from the Planning Commission. And we should note that there is some precedent for this. Columbia Distributing did have fewer, and Dawn, I'm going to have to ask you what the exact number was. I know you know it, but
Brian, it was 158 spaces fewer.
Yeah, so Columbia Distributing did have 158 spaces based on their knowledge of their operations that they were going to have at that business. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention is staff does acknowledge that there are many jurisdictions that have a lower requirement for parking for this type of use. So the project site is in both the light industrial zone and the Canby industrial area overlay zone. So as far as use goes, the conceptual e-commerce use is something that's warehousing and distributing is an explicitly allowed use in the industrial park. And this project site is in that zone. The exception to, so there are a number of regulations that any project in the zone and the overlay zone has to comply with. In general, as discussed in the staff report, the project would comply with those, except for the maximum allowed height of 45 feet. And so I do have some exhibits showing that variance. And then also in the overlay zone, is where there's the parking requirement, and as we've noted, they're proposing less parking than required. These are some exhibits created by the applicant that show that there is some variation in the building height. So they are requesting a variance to go up to 52 feet 10 inches. But most of the building would be around 46 feet tall. So part of it comes from like the crown of the building, which I have another exhibit in here that shows that. But these ones show, the ones on your screen show that they've got some decorative parapets. Our code does encourage and require some articulation to buildings. And so part of the taller walls are meant to allow for some of the like visual interest to break up the big facade. But the overall story, and this is documented in the applicant's materials, is they are looking for an e-commerce use for this site, and e-commerce uses tend to use more modern racking systems, and I will definitely defer to the applicant team to talk a little bit more about the racking systems that these types of buildings use. But as the technology has changed over time, as more technology has been brought into warehousing, I do know that racking systems have grown because they can stack more items with robotics and newer systems. So this ask is from the applicant is based on their goal of accommodating higher storage racking systems within the building, and they need 40 feet clear inside the building. And so the additional feet on the exterior of the building is really just allowing that 40 feet clear within the building. So more consistency with criteria, signs. Obviously, there's no specific business proposed at this time, so there's no clearance of signs with this land use approval. Lighting, a photometric study was prepared by the applicant. That was in the applicant materials. Like any big building, this proposed building would obviously create a large new source of light and glare and nighttime lighting. So this was disclosed in the staff report. The caveat to that is, and this is kind of borne out in the photometric study, is that because the building is set back many hundreds of feet in every direction from the property lines, staff feel that, and based on the analysis in the photometric study, that the impacts of the lighting from the building itself and the parking areas would be mitigated quite a bit. Because yes, they are asking for a higher building, but you could technically have a shorter building much closer to the property boundaries that could actually generate a lot more light and glare closer to surrounding uses. For site design, like I said, the building would be substantially set back. That drove a lot of their site planning that went along with the building. The landscaping would be layered. They've shown in their materials that they obviously realize that per the code and based on concerns from neighbors that screening is required. So they'd have fences and layered landscaping with trees and shrubs and other greenery. And then as required, the parking areas would include landscape islands. So especially on that township side, there would be a lot of layers of trees between the public realm and the building. And as required by the code, there has to be a pedestrian connection between the front of the building and the street. Actually, I might have forgot to talk about this with Dragonberry, which did a really good job of having connection with the street. This project as well, there's a direct pedestrian connection from the public realm to the front of the building, both on township, and there's a pedestrian connection to Malino. So variance criteria, I've got a couple slides here. These are very text heavy. I know we're trying to move away from text heavy slides with the Planning Commission. I know the variance will be something that we'll be discussing a lot. So I just wanted to emphasize the certain aspects of the criteria that relate to variances. So major variances have 6 criteria in our code. The first has to do with exceptional circumstances. And so the project applicant has argued, and planning staff feel like this is supported, is that it is a unique site in our industrial park. So it is a large site. It's much bigger than anything else in our industrial park. And accordingly, developers or property owners will expect the building to accommodate a larger use. And so the exceptional circumstances is this particular problem of not a problem, but circumstances of wanting a bigger building doesn't really apply to most of the other spaces in the industrial park that wouldn't want to accommodate the high-tech tall racking systems. The second one is about maintaining similar property rights. Staff believe that this variance is not necessarily required to maintain the similar property rights of other businesses or parcels elsewhere in the zone, but they would only marginally increase the property rights of this particular piece of land, largely because it already allows this type of use and this overall size of building. It's just an additional height to accommodate the racking systems. would it materially be material detrimental to the intents and purposes of the comprehensive plan or zoning? And so the staff report makes a similar argument that obviously our comp plan and our zoning ordinance contemplated large industrial projects in this portion of the park. That's what it was zoned for. And so the only intent and purpose in conflict is really the intent and purpose of the maximum height of 45 feet. And so our code is silent on that specific height requirement, what the intent of it is. But staff would argue that it's likely to limit the bulk and overall size of buildings in town. And like any of the other zones in Canby, there's height restrictions. And so so there's really no broad inconsistency with other aspects of our zoning ordinance and our comp plan, which did anticipate large industrial projects on the large parcels in our industrial park. There is a code criteria about harming surrounding properties. This kind of goes back to the height and bulk of the building. Obviously, when you make a building taller, it does have a visual impact. This is often something we analyze about, like, as you view, like have long distance views through the area across the site. Would a slightly taller building have some impact? Yes, it would. But the applicant has made the argument that this would be as small as possible by locating the building in the middle of the site. And so yes, there is additional height, but that's it's really not creating a new location of our height or bulk of building. It's just kind of increasing it by an increment. The fifth one, there's 6 of these. I apologize for how much I'm speaking. The fifth one is the minimum to alleviate the hardship. This is usually planning staff are looking for this, like, is it an excessive ask based on the premise of the ask? And so in this instance, the request for the variance is based on accommodating these higher racking systems. And if those systems require 40 feet clear inside the building, then the proposed elevations and design of the building, they've really designed it to only get them to the 40. They're not really asking for additional space in the building to accommodate other things. It's just the exterior of the building obviously has to be a little bit taller than the interior of the building. And the exceptional or unique conditions for a variance are not supposed to be caused by the applicant. And so the argument in the applicant's materials is, of course, that the market drives what goes into industrial parks. The market is what's supporting e-commerce uses in our region, and to really accommodate those uses, they would need a slightly taller building. This is just another exhibit where I highlighted some of the different building heights where, the front of the building and the sides and the back are a little bit different because of that articulation that's happening along the main facade. And I've highlighted here where the point is where it's the max requested of 52 feet, 10 inches. And so something we always like to go over is public comments. We have received a number of public comments on this. I've received 4, and then we've had some general inquiries, people calling all of us on planning staff, just asking questions about it. These public comments did have some really good comments, so I just wanted to go over those really quickly. The first one was about the height variance. and the precedents that might set by giving that variance to one property owner, and then the impacts to provision of emergency and fire services. I believe I did respond back to this person, and I said that the Canby Fire is on the list of service providers that gets notice of our projects. I believe they were in the pre-app meeting for this one, but they definitely did get the notices, and the application materials were circulated to them for comment, and they did have comments. Those were included in the packet. They did not mention anything about having problems serving the building. There were comments about impacts to parcels across township. There are some existing uses, residential uses across township that would be across from some of the main entrances to this project. Those are certainly legitimate questions. They had concerns about light pollution, access, and regional congestion in the city in general. There were additional concerns about noise and visual impacts, particularly in Timber Park. So there is a newer residential subdivision, Timber Park, that's across Sequoia, kind of diagonally from this project. And then we did receive one late written comment, and that was in the supplementary packet that we released to the Planning Commission and put on the website on Friday. And there were some concerns about public services, noise and safety hazards, and waste and pollution. So after staff analyzed the project, we identified a number of conditions that we would want to go along with the project if it were approved. There's 32 conditions total. Like many projects, most of these are standard conditions. I'm going to highlight the ones that are most particularly tailored to the project. And so the first one is one we really wanted to highlight, and I'm actually going to read this one. I'm not going to read the other ones. The project shall substantially comply with the submitted narrative and plans. Analysis conducted by city staff and the city's traffic consultant assumed an e-commerce warehouse distribution use. A different land use or building type may generate different or greater impacts. Any deviation from submitted plans may require additional land use review. And this is something that the applicant is obviously aware of. The use analyzed is a conceptual e-commerce use. We just wanted to memorialize the fact that conceptually or hypothetically a different use might eventually come into this building. If it was substantially different from what's been analyzed, then another land use approval would likely be required. Additional conditions have to do with the street improvements on the three frontages. So the project applicant would be required to build frontage improvements on Malino, Sequoia, and Township. Right-of-way dedication would be required on Malino and Sequoia, or no, excuse me, Malino and Township, but not Sequoia. Sequoia, the right-of-way was expanded when Sequoia was expanded or extended across the train tracks a few years ago. As we discussed earlier, there's a condition about in lieu fees of approximately $500,000. These would be paid to the city and contribute towards congestion relief along the 99 corridor, specifically to the Walnut Street extension. There was a condition of a provision of a usable outdoor amenity. So as the commissioners have seen in the packet, and for all these packets, there are land use tables for the minimum scores that each project has to meet. The project applicant did score themselves on having a usable outdoor amenity. They did have a couple benches, but city staff are looking for a more robust usable outdoor amenity, which does not have to be public for that particular score, but it does have to allow a more robust public amenity for the users of the site. And then this is a new standard condition that we're trying to highlight more, but we're requiring it of every project. Before before almost any major point in the process of getting a project built and approved and their certificate of occupancy, we're now expecting the applicant to keep track of how they are complying with conditions. And so we will be looking for preparation of a digest of how each condition identified has been met. So at the end of last week, so when the packet had gone out that you all originally received on the, I believe the 21st, we had not received comments from the Clackamas County Transportation Planning Agency. And so those, we did get comments after the packet went out. And so those were included in the supplemental packet that we put out on last Friday. And those included some conditions and some other language from the Clackamas County. And so we have a number of additional changes and 2 additional conditions that we are asking the Planning Commission to consider if they approve the proposed project. And I'm just going to go over those really quick. We obviously usually don't like doing this. We want all the conditions established when the packet goes out. But when an agency that has such a stake in the project affecting their facilities, we feel obligated to address those comments. And so those also create some more discussion between our consulting engineer and our public works team. And so the first one of these conditions is condition number 3 that's just being updated to clarify that on township, they would be half street improvements and only 7 feet would need to be dedicated versus what was originally stated. And then condition number 4 would be deleted in response to the county's comments. So those would be superseded, or this would be superseded, excuse me. And so the 2 new conditions that we're asking the Planning Commission to consider, the first would be new condition number 33. The applicant shall comply with all Clackamas County requirements for public improvement, including but not limited to their June 24th, 2020 letter from Kenneth Kent. And so that just memorializes the frontage improvements and other requirements from Clackamas County for Malino. And then the second one is also related to Malino Road. The county does not allow stormwater wells to be located underneath their roadways, but they are fine with that if there is an agreement between the city and the county that the city will maintain that stormwater well. So this is something that has been done up the street with, I believe, Stanton and Caruso, but also Columbia Distributing. And so some of the background to that is all uses in Canby have to treat stormwater on site for the actual use on site, but the streets can use other means of stormwater conveyance. In this case, it would be dry wells underneath. And so, I'm sorry. So this condition, new condition number 34, is just memorializing that the city public works is committed to submitting documentation to the county, agreeing to maintain the stormwater well in Malino. So I apologize for speaking so long. Based on the material submitted by the applicant and the analysis in the staff report, planning staff are recommending approval of applications design review 21-01 and variance 21-01. And we just have a little caveat in here. Obviously, there's a lot of rationale that goes along with the variance and the deviation for parking standards. And so planning staff acknowledge that requires some comfort from Planning Commission with those rationale. So with that, planning staff will take questions from the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Ryan, for your extensive, take a drink and a deep breath, I guess. So we'll start with, as usual, with Commissioner Mills. Do you have any questions for staff?
I have tons. I'm going to break my questions into two groups, the easy group and the hard group. The easy group is transportation-related questions, and I'll ask those now, and then I'll wait for some of the other commissioners to get their 2 cents in, and then perhaps Mr. Chair can get back to me. The question that I have is relating to the use of Haynes Road and the intersection of Haynes and 99 and Territorial and 99. I recall that on the Columbia project, we put prohibitions on truck traffic going east on Haynes Road to access 99 via Territorial and Haynes. Is that what you recall, Ryan?
I'm sorry, did you say Caruso?
No, I said Columbia.
Columbia,
maybe it was Caruso.
I believe so. I know we did with Caruso, and I think that's certainly something the Planning Commission can consider for this project. I think this one's a little different in that Sequoia is our main way currently to get in and out of the park, the industrial park. And so this project, unlike some of those other ones that are more to the northeast along Malino, this project does have a more direct way to just go straight from Township to Sequoia and then out to the freeway. So Kevin could certainly chime in on the distribution of trips assumed in the traffic impact analysis, but we would expect a sizable number or proportion of the trips to be using Sequoia.
I think the natural flow is going to be to Sequoia. There's not going to be a lot of truckers that are going to want to scoot up Malino and head out Haynes because, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just trying to understand. It sounds like the argument is that the natural flow is going to take truckers are going to want to take Redwood. Is that what am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
And I can add to what Ryan said. He's correct in that sense. The county is trying to discourage trucks largely going down up the Haynes intersection. So when we distributed trips from this proposed project, we distributed vehicles, passenger vehicles, and trucks separately. So we distributed trucks largely down Sequoia, following the city's truck routes to get to the highways. So those were distributed separately. So most of the trips that actually go up to the Haynes intersection are all the trips that come from Haynes are passenger vehicles, not trucks.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm going to give this back to you, but I wanted to make a comment to staff in that I'm not buying all of the arguments on the conditions for the variance. And I think we're going to have to go through them one by one and develop a consensus that way if it's possible.
Okay, Commissioner Mills, you want me to circle back to you?
Yeah, I just want to put that out there for the other commissioners to consider that these conditions of approval, they all must be met. And I think some of the logic is pretty shaky.
Okay, thank you. I'll be getting back to you then. Commissioner Trendy, do you have any questions or comments?
Yes. One, and this may be, I know that the fire department didn't say anything about it, but what is the range of their tallest fire truck? Do we know that? Like if they had to get up on the roof of this building, is that going to be an issue?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then I too am concerned about the traffic impact. I feel that it's good that we're going to make a financial difference there, but I don't know that it's enough as far as both dollar wise and in alleviating the traffic problems. And I have a problem with the deviation on the parking. You know, if this is a building that they think have potential occupants, but they're not quite sure who they are, is that going to create an issue later where some, you know, the person they think is going to go into, or the company they think is going to go into this building chooses not to, and then they have to put someone else in, then they're going to have to add parking to allow for that person, or are they going to have to, you know, bleed out all the pretty trees and green area and everything to make that work? I just feel like, you know, there's a lot of conditions and a lot of variance in this. I don't have a huge problem with it being a few feet taller, but I think the use of the spot and the land is like they're trying to, you know, squeeze a stepsister's foot into a Cinderella's slipper. So I just have, you know, I think we all kind of have an idea of who might be going in there when you say e-commerce. And I think I've also seen things about a similar possibility buying some land down in Woodburn. So, you know, I am curious as to if they're building it for a specific client, and that client doesn't materialize, then what happens with the variance that we make?
Yeah, and I guess I'll just say that was, you know, that's the reason why, you know, we added that condition, because the use is conceptual. You know, city staff don't know who the user is going to be for sure. That's not something we know, but aren't disclosing. We don't. But to analyze the project, we have to analyze an envelope basically of what the applicant believes that it'll be. So you know, you're right. We don't know what the precise parking needs of every potential building user would be.
Is that any more comments, Commissioner Trendy?
No, I just want us to all be aware that, you know, it's easy to come back and say, oh, well, we thought this was going to go in there and now it's somebody else and they need more, they need less, or whatever the situation might be. It just concerns me that we're asking kind of a unknown entity to meet a bunch of criteria.
Okay. We'll move along to Commissioner Pat, please.
So, a couple of questions regarding the height of the building. So as I understand it, where it's at its highest, it's essentially the peak, like the roof is engineered to be at a bit of a slope for drainage. And so that 50 feet, 10 inches is essentially like the peak of the roof of the building. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. And the applicant team will probably be able to clarify because they're the ones that engineered it. But my understanding is also that if and when they build the second phase, then once the building, the pad actually changes, and I think that highest spot actually is lower than 52 feet 10 inches. I may have to defer to the applicant on that.
Well, yeah, and if that's the case, the applicant can put that on their list to address when they get there. That is a question I have. Another one that I have is if we approve this, the building is built, does these, and this might just be because I'm not up to speed on all this stuff, if they decide to build the building bigger or change its orientation, do these allowances on the height of the building follow through so they can just use that on that? Or do they come back to us and say, hey, we're making these significant changes, and then we can say, well, now it's closer to the road or the building is bigger, and no, that doesn't work anymore?
Dawn, you might want to chime in here. I think there's definitely some director's discretion on what constitutes a modification. We do process modifications for projects. We have some ranges of what's allowed within that. in our code. It's actually a little vague, but so it kind of depends on how much the project would deviate from what's been originally approved. We certainly have projects where they make smaller changes before it's built that don't really impact the overall building envelope or the height but Dawn, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, Commissioner Patton, there's, as Ryan's saying, this could range from something very minor, which should be handled likely administratively, to something major, which could be a complete re-review by a planning commission. And I think part of this hearing is there is some discretion on the planning commission's part to condition this based on what the planning commission thinks as significant in those changes. So I think in light of what we're looking at and the parameters around the use that's quite specific, although there could be a change, they have identified as the applicants quite specific use criteria that they have. If that were to substantially change, we've told the applicant that they would be going back through this process yet again. So that's kind of the situation that we're in. But like Ryan's saying, if it's a minor thing that would be, relatively insignificant, there is administrative discretion that staff has.
Okay, because where I'm kind of getting at is I am not going to get necessarily hung up on the height of the building based on all the things that the city has said, its orientation, its setback from the road, the size of it, so on and so forth. But if I were to approve this based on those stipulations, and then all of a sudden it's moved closer to the road, or the building is much bigger, and all of those things that allowed it to kind of fit within these stipulations are now out the window, I would have a significant problem with that.
And I would say that staff would as well.
Okay.
So I'm just echoing, part of this is the code does give the director a significant amount of discretion, but I would agree with everything you've said.
Well, then I would say that however it needs to be worded so that we have more discretion than not, I would want to see put into this so that it doesn't turn into something that it is not meant to be, because it's specific but vague at the same time. And that gives me a little bit of heartburn. Okay, let me check more size stuff here. Height. So we didn't hear back from Canby Fire whether their truck would be able to access the roof on that, correct?
They did not say anything about that specifically. No, most of their comments were just they
were code related, correct? The fire suppression and all that.
Right.
Okay, and then some of the height is attributed to the decorative facades as well, which wouldn't necessarily need to be accessed by Canby Fire. Do we need to evaluate code for height? Oh, so here's something. When I was looking through this, if they are coming to us and saying that the industry has changed and, a higher height is standard, or looked at better when it comes to occupying these facilities, is it something that should maybe be a direction to staff that we need to kind of take a look at what the industry standard is currently and whether we need to look at our code and see if that needs to change to make sure that the industrial park and the code stays relevant to the industry? Is that something that's already on the list?
Yes, and we have noticed that our height maximums are lower than other jurisdictions. So I think that is likely something that we would look at in the near future.
And I would just like to add to that, Commissioner Patton. I think that many codes deal with height in relation to like 1 foot of setback from the property line for every additional 2 feet in height. They set a maximum. And as was stated by Ryan earlier, this building is significantly from any adjacent property line. So I think part of that is it's a relationship to the size of the building. So that does need to be reevaluated in our code.
Yeah, because our code doesn't capture that relationship. It just says 45 feet. And so that's kind of what we have to work with in the code right now.
Okay, I think that might be something to take a look at. In regards to the, and this isn't necessarily specific to this application, but this is something that came up in reviewing this. With the build out of the industrial park, how many, and I understand if you can't answer this question now, if you need to get back to me, that's fine. But how many streets in the industrial park are still under county jurisdiction, but will essentially become city streets once the development is built out?
Well, I'm not sure I have a great answer to that. There's been, my understanding is there's ongoing negotiations between the city and county on the number and timing of, and you might be privy to some of those conversations.
Oh, there's been conversations for decades, but
sure,
yes.
Sure. But having projects do frontage improvements doesn't necessarily bring in the whole facility into the city. So, as for now, Malino, I believe First Avenue up on the northeast part of the park is still county road.
Well, and this gets back to something that I mentioned time and time again. I don't necessarily care about now. I care about 5, 10, 15 years from now, because the last thing I want to do is have decisions that we make today saddle the leaders and the citizens of this city with a problem 10, 15, 20 years from now. And so if there are a number of streets that are in this industrial park that will eventually be absorbed by the city, I think we need to really take a look at what money needs to be collected from these developers as this is going on, and how we're going to, plan the changes in the infrastructure for these things. Because it's all well and good to say this is gonna work now, but in 15 years, I don't want a citizen coming to me and saying, "What the heck were you thinking? You approved this, and now it's a hot mess." So that's something that we need to consider.
Sure.
Commissioner,
I think. Go ahead.
Just to answer part of that, the finance piece about acquisition, staff really can't answer, but in terms of the standard, and I just wanted to put that on the record because I think there was some confusion about that. For Malino, the county, I've had several conversations with the Public Works Director and the city engineer today on this topic. So the good news is that Malino will, in fact, I can't address the acquisition, but the standard of that street is going to be built so that it could be brought in easily to the city. And so back to that standard being more significant, it's really more in the paving. The cross-section is essentially the same in the city and the county, but the thickness of the pavement and the urban standard and county, not rural standards, but urban, that standard is more substantial than the county thickness on pavement is what I've been told. So so wanted to put that out there.
Yes, and I will take it one step further to say that I understand all that, but I don't care. I care about how it's being built now, but the county will then be responsible for maintaining that street. And it's all well and good if it's built to a higher standard now, but if it isn't maintained like some of the city streets are, by the time the city takes it over, it could be a crumbling, failing mess. And so that is the look out to the future piece of it. I think that was the questions I had regarding that. I will just say, similar to other commissioners, I have some concerns regarding the parking variance requested on this. To be quite honest with you, and I'm going to be very blunt, almost every single one of these that I have seen since I become a commissioner has requested a variance for parking. And clearly we put the requirements in the code for parking based on what we need in the city. And I think we need to start looking at that a little closer. So that is one of the concerns that I have.
Commissioner Patton, could I just speak to that briefly?
Sure.
It's another item that the city really needs to reevaluate holistically in the code. The code really needs to be looked at more holistically, but parking standards in particular are ones. And so there is a basis for the Planning Commission to support adjustments based on specific documentation, which I think goes back to the specificity of the use. And if that substantially changes, and we'll have to go back through the process again.
Yeah, because it said in subsection 16.10.10, we have the ability to make exceptions based on clear and objective findings. I appreciate a lot of the information that the applicant gave, but some of them was mentioned, like the amount of sidewalk that they're putting in. The amount of sidewalk has nothing to do with how many people are going to park in this thing. I mean, if we want to get real serious about this sort of building is going to, we do not have a strong transportation system that links CAT up to other transportation systems. So the ability for people to use CAT to go from outside of the city to access this building is not an attractive feature of this plan. They put in that they're going to leave drop-off zones. Well, that's fine, but if someone is working nearby and can drop somebody off, great. But otherwise, that's a new car in the parking lot. Also, a lot of these people, my suspicion, if this is based on an e-commerce warehouse, based on the current city's housing inventory and prices and market, people who would be normally working as a warehouse position in this building are not going to be able to afford to live in this city and ride a bicycle or take CAT or walk to this building. And so therefore, they're going to be coming from outside of the city and parking at this building. Those are the things that give me a pause for concern as to giving them a variance of 66 parking spaces for this specific but not super specific building.
Yeah, so noted, and I think the applicant can speak directly to what they did in fact evaluate.
Perfect. And I think that was it for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Pat. We'll move along. Commissioner Heath, do you have any questions or comments?
I, for one, not real concerned about the variance in height there. It is surrounded by a berm with the overpass from Sequoia over towards the railroad there. And then there's a hill on the other side. So it's largely concealed from view from the residential neighborhoods on the other side of Sequoia and the schools that are over there. Not really a concern to me. The parking spaces, I also understand that, e-commerce and warehousing is going to use less spaces than, say, a retail establishment. What does kind of bother me is somewhere in that packet, they said there's going to be like 400 employees per shift so that'd be 400 parking spots plus another 50% of that for crossover between shifts. If that could potentially lead into like 2,400 people a day. If I'm doing my math right, it'd be 400 employees a shift, 3 shifts a day, it'd be 1,200 cars going in there, times coming and going, that would be 2,400 trips. That's an extra 100 trips an hour right there. I don't see how our streets are going to be able to maintain another 100 trips an hour without without the Walnut extension for one, and like some other road improvements. And I don't see $500,000 being even making a dent into the road improvements. So it's just something to think about. I know that traffic's to be expected with expansions, but an extra 2,400 trips a day just from employees, not even the trucks included, that is very, very significant. And then also, this building is going to be built in 2 phases. Why would somebody build 700,000 square feet of a building and then do a second phase to do a tiny fraction additional? Why even think about doing it in 2 phases? It's doesn't makes sense to me. It seems like there would be a lot of variable costs that could be, done away with. Or is this a backup in case we don't approve the parking? So it's just, I'm curious why they chose to do it in 2 phases. So that's all what I got.
Thank you, Commissioner Heap. Commissioner Hutchinson.
Wow, this is a lot of traffic. Every point that's been made thus far has pretty much been true. To a degree, the city's kind of dug itself this hole, though. I mean, I'm not sure that per square foot we can fill up the industrial park without getting some similar amount of trips to and from there. And we wanted an industrial park, and we made an industrial park, and failure's over fairly quickly, but success is an ongoing pain in the behind. So it seems like that's what we're looking at. And in the past, we're doing better at filling up our industrial zone than we are at filling up our housing zones that we have set. And they're of a type for, as another commissioner has said, I doubt that the people who are working in this warehouse are going to be able to afford to buy a home, at least without getting 2 or 3 other employees in on them with it. All that said, I see this as an appropriate use of the space. And as far as the height variance is concerned, the visual impact all makes sense to me. I think it'll be an improvement that we were hoping would happen until now that we're staring down the barrel of it. And we're starting to look at it and the size of our community and say, are we ready for this? Well, I think we're ready, and I think that we'll rise to the challenge, but traffic will definitely be different. And that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hutchinson. Commissioner Boatwright, what are your thoughts here? Do you have any questions for the staff?
Well, everybody has pretty much brought up everything that I'm concerned about. I'll wait till after I hear from the applicant, but I'd like to mention one thing very quickly. Is I drove through California and stayed at Patterson, California on a trip down south one time and spent a night there in a motel. And we were like 10 miles from Patterson, and we were wondering what the great big glow was in the sky. We thought it was, first I thought it was a stadium. Then as we got closer, we thought maybe it was a prison. And there are all these warehouses. It turned out it was all warehouses surrounded by these huge fences, which I know this is not going to look anything like that. But there was so much light in there that you couldn't see the stars in the sky at all in Patterson, California. That was an Amazon warehouse. The light from this thing, I know we have standards, but I don't know if you could really make that big of a building, the light negligible. That's all I wanted to mention.
Thank you, Commissioner Boatwright. I have a couple of questions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, Columbia Distributing had an extra 1,200 car trips per day. Is that correct? Maybe Commissioner Boatwright remembers that. I think it was 1,200 a day. Can we go back and if Commissioner Hebe is correct, 2,400 car trips out of this new facility, and Stanton and Caruso between them probably equal that, because I don't have it in front of me, the Columbia Distributing. So we're looking at 12, 24, 36, 6,000 approximate new car trips per day between just those 4 facilities. If we add if Commissioner Hebe is correct on the 2,400, and can you help me with that, Don? Is that correct?
I think I'm going to refer to Kevin on that question because it's kind of a global one, Commissioner Savory, as to his recollection, because I believe DKS reviewed those.
Yeah. So to answer your question, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, these traffic studies consider all of those developments that you mentioned, in addition to all the when we do the transportation analysis letter analysis plus the transportation impact studies, we keep a tab of all these trips that are generated on the system, and all the currently in process developments that have vested trips. There's a total of 5,200 trips system-wide. That includes the ones you mentioned, in addition to other ones around the city, and those are added on top of this project. So in this case, that 5,200 is over the course of the day, and then in the PM peak hour, that total is around 600.
6,000.
600, sorry, and then 5,200 for the day.
I'm confused.
Chair Savory.
Yes, Larry.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Boatwright. There's one thing I noticed in this report that I've never seen before, and if I wish that it had been spoken of before, and that's the intersections of Highway 99E at Ivy Street, Pine Street, and Haynes Road at peak hours. With or without this project, these intersections would have operations exceeding adopted mobility standards. To me, that reads that there's already too much traffic at those intersections. So I go right along with you. The number of cars that we're keep bringing in after every time we approve something like this. And then I heard today, which I'd never heard before either, that the Walnut Street extension might not be built until 2035. I don't think we're ready for this. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boatwright, Kevin, can you address those items? I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so the three intersections that you brought up, particularly the Pine Street intersection and the Haynes Street intersection, both of those were locations that were identified in the transportation system plan as areas that were going to be over the mobility standard in the horizon of the TSP, which is actually 2030. So those were previously flagged. So there is an improvement in the TSP at the Pine Street intersection to mitigate that issue there, and that is included in your system development charges. So that has been collected from all these developments. And then the other two locations that you mentioned, the Ivy intersection and the Haynes intersection, those ones, they were not projects identified in the TSP for those locations. So that's the reason why we pursued the fee in lieu analysis, and that was largely coordinated with ODOT. So what happens in these cases is when the intersections are exceeding the mobility standard without the proposed project, the standard is to mitigate it back to the condition it would be at without the project. So in this case, we're mitigating the issue that the traffic that this proposed project is generating and sending through these intersections, we're mitigating it back to the conditions it would be without this project at all. And that's how the fee in lieu that was brought up by Ryan earlier, the $500,000. That's how that total was developed based upon the trips that this site would send through those intersections compared to the total traffic that will go through those intersections.
And Kevin, just one more point. So in Pine Street, I believe that there's an immediate improvement going to happen on that. Am I correct, based on SDCs?
Yeah, there's a project ongoing right now, and then there's another longer term project in the TSP that ODOT is pursuing to improve that intersection that is included in your TSP.
Well, and this is Commissioner Patton. I believe that there is also within the next few years going to be a pretty significant update to Ivy Street, if memory serves me correctly.
Yeah, and I think you're correct, Commissioner Patton. I mean, there's ongoing projects that are happening on Ivy. I know that. So
Okay. Well, let's move along to the applicant. Are there any more questions for staff? Okay, let's move along to the applicant. Who will be speaking for the applicant?
Good evening, Chair Savory. Steve Sieber here with Trammell Crow. I'll be speaking for the applicant tonight.
Okay, thank you. Since we've gone along here, you have 15 minutes to state your case.
Yeah, Greg Blefkin's with us tonight from VLMK. He's our lead designer, and John Varon, who is a development associate with us here at Trammell Crow. We had some prepared remarks, but I'm going to kind of skip those over. We'll try not to use the 15 minutes here, and maybe use part of the 15 minutes to answer a couple of the questions, and then so you can get to the some of the opponents' testimony, and we're not here later than we really need to be. So, and thanks to Ryan too. Nice job on the presentation. So, and I think, so Steve Sieber with Trammell Crow Company, our office address, see where I'm sitting right now, 1300 Southwest 5th Avenue in Portland, Oregon. We're, for good or bad, we're next door to City Hall. So if that's any help. And I'm in the office tonight. So, and most of you know me because I've been in front of the commission before, but just quickly about TCC. So we've been operating in Portland, in the Portland Metro continuously since 1978. We have a local team of 12 folks here in Portland. I grew up in Oregon here, as did John Varon, OSU grad, and Greg is a local consultant that's a Portland-based firm. So this is a totally local-based team that's working on the project. And we've been doing industrial development here for a long time. And we've been, I would argue, the lead and most, we've done the most projects in the last decade of anyone in our market for industrial. So this is our expertise. And we've been enjoying working in the city of Canby. This is my 4th time in front of the Planning Commission in the last 2.5 years. So that's probably why you guys have a familiar face here. 2019, we came in for Project Shakespeare and our Columbia Distributing. We requested and received the Commission's approval for that project. Very, very similar to what you're looking at here tonight. In August of 2020, we brought in a project we call Baker Center, or we called it Canby West maybe at the time, a 3-building project, industrial project at First and Walnut, seeking approval. We received the Commission's approval there. And then just earlier this year, testified in support of the TSP plan amendment for the Walnut Street extension. And now I'm here for our 4th presentation. Let me just scroll through some notes. I'm going to spin through this. So this is a large development. You heard it. It's a large building. It's on a large site. It's a unique site. There are few, if any, of these left in the metro area. It's nearly 48 acres, 800,000 feet of total buildable. All the things that have been discussed, there's trips, plenty of trips associated with autos and trucks. It's exactly what these facilities do. There's light, though I would say light now generated by these projects is much better than it's ever been. I don't know, Commissioner Boatwright, when that Amazon facility was built down there, but with the LED lights and things like that, the cutoffs, the lighting impacts are much better. But it's a grass seed field. It's dark right now. It's going to become, if approved and built, would become much lighter. We'll use local, utilities and services. I think that was a concern maybe that came up in some of the opponents' written testimony. But as noted by the staff, what we've submitted is consistent with the zoning that's here. We have asked for a variance in the parking modification. We can talk about those. We think good reasons to request those. We've done funded the extensive studies of the traffic for DKS through the city. We understand that we're willing to pay our fair share, the fee in lieu and others, and we can talk about that. and as Commissioner Patton and also Ryan in the presentation commented on, that this is what this site is for, what we're proposing. And it was contemplated as early as the mid 1980s, if you remember that from the conversations we had on Project Shakespeare. And folks went back to look at, how long this 300 plus acres has been considered for industrial development. And then just kind of finally to wrap up here, I'll just say, thank you to Dawn and to Ryan. They did a fantastic job on this project going through this. They were very thorough. It's a very large and difficult project. The staff report that they've provided you is excellent. We've had multiple, we submitted this in January, third week of January, something like that. And we spent time going back and forth in a real effort to make sure that staff could present and we could all feel good about the presentation tonight. And they've done that. So thanks to both of them and the other supporting staff behind the scenes. And then just finally here, we agree with the staff's findings. The recommendations, the conditions, including the conditions that have just been recently added by the county. We support those two. The fee in lieu, I mentioned that earlier. We certainly support that. We're not looking to do anything other than pay our fair share along the way. And I think we've demonstrated that in our acceptance of the conditions. And with that, I'm just going to pause for a second and just see, Greg, if there's anything you want to hit really quickly. I didn't start my timer, but we definitely don't want to use the whole 15. But Greg, I'm going to give you just the floor here for just a second to add anything.
Yes. Greg Blefkin. I'm with VLMK Consulting Engineers. Address is 3933 Southwest Kelly, Portland, Oregon, 97239. We have teamed with Trammell Crow on a few of these projects, the Canby West project that Steve mentioned, the Columbia Distributing project that was completed and occupied last year. If I might share the screen, a couple responses to some of the comments. If I can't share the screen, maybe I can have Ryan pull up the colored site plan that we provided. Here we go. So a couple comments. The setbacks that we have from Township, Malino, and Sequoia are significant. 354 feet, 347, 240 feet. And that allows us to provide a good truck courtyard for maneuvering and trailer storage. One of the questions or one of the comments had to do with the right-of-way improvements for Township and Malino. Are they county? Are they city? Similar to what we did on Columbia Distributing, we designed for the widest right-of-way for a collector street, which was 74 feet overall, 37 feet half street. And we designed it per the most stringent standards. We utilized Clackamas County's design standards that did have a thicker asphalt section than the city standards. So that was a condition that was put on us, was to comply with the city standards, because at the time, and they still are, more stringent with the exception of the paving thickness. One of the other comments was access onto Malino. Those two access points that we're illustrating are secondary access points. Primary access points for trucks would be the westernmost access on Township for trucks entering, likely trucks exiting, and or the easternmost exit onto Township. So those are the primary access points. The parking variance is very much specific to the use. And for the particular e-commerce center that has a lot of warehouse, racking, sort systems, it's become more automated. So the proposed parking spaces more than accommodated the shift change. And there might have been a misunderstanding in the number of shifts. The information we provided only included 2 shifts, with the largest shift being the peak shift, maybe approaching that 400, the smaller shift being much less than that. The height variance, again, the 40-foot clear height gets us another rack. So the volume of the warehouse space is greatly increased by going up another 4 feet. For Columbia Distributing, the clear height was 36 feet. Our walls were in the 41-foot range. We actually had parapets there. Right across the street, American Steel, those wall heights are 40 feet, and they are at the minimum setback along Township, which is 35 feet. So much more of a mass, much more different when the building's set back 350 or 340 feet from the street. One clarification on Ryan's comment, the planter area at the northwest corner across from American Steel, Sequoia, and Township is actually a berm. It's a landscape berm that's 4 to 5 feet tall, and it has significant plantings in there, primarily to screen, buffer the truck court, the primary truck entrance, and the building itself. Stormwater will be retained on site via underground chambers. The surface soils don't infiltrate well. We need to get down to the gravel layer, which in certain cases is as close as 6 feet or as deep as 20 feet. So we will be using underground chambers for our storage. The lighting, we've pulled all the site lighting back from the street, or at least our on-site lighting. There is a code requirement that the closer you get with lights to the setbacks, the lower the light height, which doesn't provide very good lighting coverage. So the layout that we tried to take into consideration was to pull it back from the streets. We will have street lights. Those will be per Canby utility standard. But the site lights, we try to minimize, keeping the lights down where they are going to provide the needed illumination for loading. A couple comments from the commissioners that maybe we can address. There was a truck route requirement on Columbia Distributing, and in this case, as DKS indicated,
Greg, we've got 2 minutes left, so maybe we rather than answer the questions, why don't we wrap up, and then we'll let the opponents go, and then we could get back to questions that we didn't. I appreciate that, but I think maybe we keep moving along. I have some notes here too, so where we can answer some questions. But why don't we turn it back over to Chair Savory. So thank you for the opportunity to present tonight, and look forward to additional discussion. Back to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. So, Ryan, do we have any other proponents that would like to speak in favor of this project?
I don't believe so. Eric's helping manage who's on the call. Eric, do you know if we have any proponents?
I'm not aware of any other proponents.
Okay. Well, then let's move along to opponents, of which I understand there are a couple. Who do we have first?
Commissioner Savory?
Yes.
And Eric, I don't know if you have created a list. I have a list here, and I'd be more than happy to help be the facilitator like last time for monitoring the people, if that works for you.
That works for me.
Eric?
Yeah, it's been a little tricky. It's hard to tell with some of the names.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, what I can do is I can just go down the list that I have here, and these people identify themselves so that I can mark down that they wish to speak. If that works for folks.
And how many people do you have on your list?
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I have about 13 people.
Okay. And
real quick, Chair Savory, what if people just use the raise hand function? It's right there in reactions. You press raise hand and the hand goes up. That may be a little more concise.
I don't recommend that.
Yeah. Well, let's just name the people. I'm going to hold them to the 5 minutes.
Okay, so really quickly, we're going to go down through this list. We have John and Barbara.
John and Barbara.
And go ahead and if you're going to, okay,
We're ready. We're ready.
Well, now hold on a second. We're just going to identify the people who are going to speak as opponents, and then we'll go down the list. So there's an Amanda, and your last name is cut off. It starts with Bierb.
Okay. She'll identify herself.
Okay, she's not on anymore. James N.
Those are people from Dragonberry.
Okay, we have Brenda Gunders. I'm sure that's Gunderson, maybe. Okay. Jennifer K. It just says Jennifer K. Do you wish to speak?
That's a VLMK employee, so that's
okay.
a staff member.
That's what we want to identify. Ben Hagerman.
Also VLMK staff.
Perfect.
I'm glad they're on.
Cindy Hayter. She is still on here. Do you wish to speak as an opponent or a proponent?
No, we're all done with proponents.
Yes, I would like to speak.
Okay, she's going to speak. James Walton. Not speaking. Marcos. And I think the last name has been butchered a little bit. Davila.
He was from the Dragonberry team.
Dragonberry. There's someone on here. Amy. Just Amy.
That's Dragonberry team.
Oh, duh. That's right. I already have you cleaned off. Okay. There's someone who was listed as just. Oh no, just W is gone. Good. Sean, I have you is speaking. Elsie. Yes. Nope. And then there was someone that was just iPhone. And they appear to be gone as well. Okay, so that if you wanted to speak in opposition and I did not read your name and you say yes, I want to speak, speak now, please.
I just want to make sure you have Sean and Julie Collinson on there.
Yes, Sean. Yep, they're on here.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, so we have Sean and Julie Collison. We have John and Barbara, no last name.
Yep.
Cindy Hayter.
Hyder.
Okay.
Okay. And that's all that I have that actually have stuck around.
That's what I have as well.
Okay, so let's start with Cindy Hyder.
Hello. Yes. Actually,
okay.
I'm here with my husband Dan.
Okay, so Dan and Cindy. So if you could state your name and address, please.
Dan and Cindy Hyder. Our address is 470 South Sequoia Parkway, Canby. We are across the street from the proposed development on the corner of Sequoia and Township.
Okay, I've got you down for 5 minutes here.
Okay.
So fire away.
All right. Well, I'm just going to ramble through a few things and because I have a list. So our biggest concern, of course, is traffic. I don't know. You mentioned that Township is a collector street. I don't know what kind of traffic it's rated for right now. It's a 2-lane road. My guess is it's not rated for an additional 2,400 trips or however many we were discussing. I think that number was brought up by someone earlier. You're talking about making some improvements. It appears that the improvements addressed on the proposed plan involve paving on half of the street along with some sidewalks. I'm not quite sure how half of the street is going to be sufficient to, unless these people are only going to drive in one way and drive out the same way and never cross on the opposite side of the street. So we have many concerns being across the street. One, of course, is all the traffic and the fact that there's no light at that intersection. And, right now with all the big trucks parked with gravel, they're blocking the center lanes now. I have no idea how we're actually going to be able to get out of our driveway. If you're going to end up having to widen that road, which I was told before there was nothing in the plan about that, that means we're going to lose land on our side of the street. That, of course, is a big concern of ours. There are no sidewalks on our side of the street when you're talking about adding, pedestrian traffic and all that kind of thing. So it's not set up for any of this kind of stuff. My, overall concern is that we're pushing a project, or you're attempting to push through a project, basically for a building that is for a specific type of tenant, but it hasn't even been identified. If there's no specific tenant going in, why is there such a rush to get this project done on this time frame? Why are we making all these exceptions regarding parking and building height and allowing all this additional traffic and the offset for all the additional traffic? I mean, the intersection of Sequoia and Township hasn't been addressed in all the traffic concerns, just the ones up off Highway 99. And this one's going to get the biggest impact from what I can see. But the offset is basically to write a check for $500,000 and we all just look the other way. I mean, how does that compensate all the people that live around there that are going to be dealing with this?
Well, the problem is too, you were talking about this stuff was planned back even as early in the 80s. We're now in 2021 and there's been a significant amount of traffic added between the 80s to now. And now you want to put more traffic in there. I don't see how it can help the situation that we have now.
Yeah, it would appear it's just going to cause gridlock everywhere. And, considering most of the people that are going to be working there, it sounds like are not even going to be local, probably people that live in the Canby area. So they're all going to be people coming in from other towns. If in your initial meeting, one of the things you mentioned was that you felt this was going to help bring jobs to Canby. Well, we drive down Highway 99 now. There's signs everywhere of people looking for employees and having difficulty finding them. So you're going to bring in an additional, 600 people or however many people you're planning to hire per shift. I have no idea where all those people are going to come from, but they're going to come in trucks or cars from other parts of the state or the metro area probably. The truck traffic is another whole issue. So you have basically, from what I was looking at in the plan, maybe 250 feet to the truck driveway past that intersection, where most of the trucks are going to be coming into the guard station. So, and I'm guessing semis, I think are around about 80 feet long. That's about 3 semis worth. I mean, you're going to have them all jammed up on there trying to get in and out, blocking traffic.
Nonsense.
How in the world are you going to make that? I mean, Township can't support this, is all I'm saying. It cannot support it. Even widening one side of the road is not going to fix this problem. It's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, there's no infrastructure in Canby for this. Like, I don't understand how you can push this.
Yeah, you have about a minute, just to let you know.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. So I guess the main things we'd like to have addressed has to do with the Sequoia Township area. The road is the biggest issue. We're not excited about the lighting. One of the other issues you talked about was the visual impact to the surrounding communities or properties, excuse me. And everybody's saying how minimal the impact's going to be. But right now there is nothing there. So putting a 44-foot building versus nothing is already a huge impact. And then you want to go 52 feet. So I don't understand why we're making all these exceptions, again, for a project, for a building, when there's no tenant identified. And when the tenant is identified, they may come in with several different requirements. And once that building's built, we're not going to come back and say, oh, no, now you can't raise the second phase and make it shorter because we've already allowed it. You've already set a precedence. So, I don't think this time is right for this project at this point.
Well, thank you very much. Dan, Cindy, appreciate your testimony and taking the time out of your day to do this. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can we move along to John and Barbara with no last name?
Hi, it's on our screen, John and Barbara Fontana, and our address is 1096 South Willow Street here in Canby. So our backyard abuts the Sequoia Parkway. So anyway, so we understand that, you know, this whole area along Sequoia is zoned for commercial use. But we would just like you to consider the impact of the potential development on the quality of life for our neighborhood and the greater Canby community. Our specific concerns, of course, are increased traffic, particularly commercial trucks and semis that abut a residential school zone and residential area and school zone. And it's not just this project, but when you add on next week, you're meeting or we're meeting to discuss the project right following it. So all of Sequoia Parkway is going to be developed in commercial zone with semi trucks, with a proposed railway being added. And so our concern is the livability of our community. We have a concern about noise abatement measures, what noise abatement measures are put into place to minimize the noise disruption, and of course the light that was dealing with the increased lights. And can our infrastructure support these incredibly large projects right now with water and with electricity, considering, you know, the constraints of our drought season and all of that. So thank you for letting us speak.
Well, thank you for taking your time to come in and give us your point of view. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. Then that would leave us with Sean and Julie Collinson. Well, thank you very much. Ryan?
Yes. Are we getting a opportunity to talk, sir?
Yes.
Okay.
You now have your 5 minutes of fame.
Okay. First question I would have for you is Molino Road basically goes out to a low-hanging bridge. So you basically have Molino Road only accessible one way with all these large trucks coming in and out of these facilities. In the event of an emergency, you basically have created a bottleneck you're not going to be able to get the vehicles out of. Secondly, by accessing all of the vehicles out onto Township Road, you're actually excluding the ability of school buses to be able to get to and from the school. Baker Prairie School is right in that same area. And if you're going to push them all out into that same area, they're not going to be able to get out. And I know this is just a traffic concern, but I don't think that this has really been thought out as far as what your traffic concern is. You put 1,600 more cars on the road, including large trucks and even delivery trucks coming in and out. They're all in a rush. They're all in a hurry. You have only 4-way stops to control traffic in these areas. You're not going to be able to do anything other than bottleneck traffic for about an hour in the morning or two. As far as your vehicles not going down going down routes outside of town, I can tell you, I work in the patrol division of the sheriff's office. I see those trucks coming in and out of Haynes Road all day long. They're not following any thing that you've decided to put in their way, saying that they can't do these things. So I guess you'd have to get on board with the county and make those, a non-truck route, and then we could start citing those trucks for large amounts of, and maybe that would stop the problem. But again, I don't think you're considering the traffic implications that go with this. The other part is, if you look at Columbia, I'm not sure how many jobs they actually brought to the city of Canby, but my understanding was they brought all their people that were in their other facility out to this facility. And if you wanted to work for Columbia, you actually had to go into Portland. So if this new facility coming in isn't offering jobs to the city of Canby, what are you gaining from it?
So I agree I mimic the concerns of Commissioner Penn and the haters, of course. Again, all those who are opponent to this, but you look at a safety concern for the schools in that area. You say that you haven't had the acknowledgement from the fire district about whether or not there is an emergency situation in those areas, Canby Police and Clackamas County Sheriff's Office also have to be in consideration then. And again, in the event of a catastrophic situation in which there might be an unprecedented incident at one of those schools, if you're having 16 to 2,400 cars go down in that particular area at any given time during an hour, a day, having access for emergency vehicles is a considerable concern for me as well as the rest of the community. You're also talking about pushing traffic down Township, which is not constructed for high traffic volumes as what is being suggested, given the fact that from what I understand, Kevin is suggesting to pushing out to Ivy and Haynes via Township. So with that respect, Ivy is not being constructed for heavy traffic, and already it is a conundrum with regards to people coming in and out of Township, or excuse me, Ivy via 170. So unless traffic is routed specifically through Sequoia and Walnut, and the $547,000 non-generous donation from the specific builders, and that is not by emotion, that is by the fact that I know how much it costs for road improvements, will not be a sufficient amount to improve and maintain Township, Malino, Haynes, Blount, Ivy, in consideration of accessing or allowing this considerable amount of traffic. And I also was kind of taken back by the height of the view of not being a concern by one of the other commissioners, given the fact that like said, it was a low elevation, they're going to put up berms. You don't live in this area. You don't also live in the fact that there is a new development that has also been created. And those sight lines are very visible. We see Columbia. We see everything. And mind you, it is a lot of field and growth areas in which we are doing much of our farmland, but your view of these unsightly buildings is visible. So given these considerations, I find it very frustrating that there is opponents or proponents for this that haven't lived in this area. And the other consideration is, for last and foremost, is that is considered a 24-hour facility. So an 8-hour or a 16-hour work shift is not considering in this particular design. We're given the understanding that this is a 24-hour facility.
Julie, your time is up, but
good.
So thank you so much for taking the time and sticking with us for a couple of hours. Thank you so much. Okay. So you got to turn that off. And now we can go back to the applicant. You have 10 minutes for rebuttal if you wish to make use of it.
Yeah, I think it may make sense here to use that traffic was a big concern and there were some questions that came up. Kevin is the city traffic engineer and may be able to answer a couple of these questions. I just heard Township brought up several times, and maybe Kevin, you could elaborate on some of the concerns there about traffic on Township.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on. I think one of the original questions was regarding some of the analysis that was really just focused on the highway. We analyzed numerous intersections in this area. We did 11 in total, including intersections up and down Township. So we know what the existing level of traffic is along those facilities. And as I mentioned earlier, we add the trips on top of those existing vehicles. So in particular, the level of traffic on Sequoia with this project will be about 500 vehicles an hour. And the capacity of that facility of Sequoia and also Township, which are both collector facilities, is between 12 and 1,500 trips an hour. So the forecasted level of traffic on both of these facilities is well within the range, or well below the range of what those facilities can accommodate according to their classification and actually the way that they're built as 3-lane sections, at least on Sequoia. So regarding that question, it's that they're well within the range of traffic that would be acceptable along those facilities.
Any more you would like to?
Yeah, I think maybe I'd just kind of comment on, there's a question, it came up from the commissioners also, about this, there not being a specific user here. It might be helpful for everybody to kind of understand the business plan for something like this and the tremendous amount of investment that needs to go in just to getting to talk to you guys today. Costs a lot of money to get to right here. But we have worked with the land sellers for several years now to identify this site. We've invested money with design teams, traffic engineers, everything else to prepare the site for what we think is the most likely type of tenant. And that's what we submitted in January. I would say between the first 6 weeks of the year, we received 11 different inquiries from 11 different users about this project. There's a lot of interest in these. There's a huge demand for this type of facility, whether it's for just about, it's kind of the unseen part of our society, where if you need a toothbrush, it comes out of a building like this, or if you need auto parts and something like that, it comes out of buildings like these. Food or beverage, like up at Columbia. So we positioned the design of the project and the submittal here so that we could put it in the middle of the fairway or the road, however you want to say that, and prepare for one of these many users. It was discussed earlier by Dawn, and I think the question came up from one of the commissioners. If there is a dramatic change in what that user needs, we're fully prepared to come back to Planning Commission and work with Dawn and Ryan and the others to submit and seek approval for something that is, much different than what we've proposed here. And I guess there's some little bit of, discretion in what that is. But if it became two buildings, or if it became a building that got pushed up against one side or the other, we would recognize that was a material change to what we proposed, and we would understand that we would need to seek reapproval. So I think that hopefully that answers a question that came through a couple other groups, and I might even be done with my time. But Greg, is there anything else you think that would be useful to spend our last couple minutes to maybe answer a question? Maybe we focus on the opponent testimony, and then if the commissioners have follow-up questions, we can get to
We actually have 5 minutes. So.
Oh, okay.
5 minutes. Okay.
We don't need to use it all, Greg.
As far as the opponent's testimony, obviously there's a lot of concern about traffic. I hope that Kevin at DKS has addressed at least the traffic concerns, that the analysis has been done, the improvements will be done to public and city and or county standards. So we will be doing significant improvements along the township and Milano frontages, very similar to what you see at Columbia Distributing. First Avenue is a collector street, Township is a collector street, and now Milano will be a collector street as well. The right-of-way that we're giving up on Milano is a greater standard than the county standard of width, and we did that along the two developments up Milano, Columbia Distributing and Stanton as well. So the improvements in the infrastructure that we will be bringing to this property and to serve other properties will be more than adequate to serve us and other properties in the future. As for warehouses, water, there will be a largest shift to 400 employees, so there will be domestic water use with that. Sanitary services there. We will be actually installing a lift station to deal with sanitary services. Electrical services for a building of this size, even with automation, we may be at a 6,000 amp service, which is not significant in comparison to what's available. I think if we can address maybe the building height variance concern, I agree. It's a 45 to 50 foot building. It is going to change the landscape. we're trying to soften that impact. And this is a very unique site, one of the only large sites remaining that can accommodate a facility of this size and a height of this size. As far as fire apparatus access, and speaking with Matt English and Clackamas Fire, they have no concerns. We're providing access. We're meeting their Clackamas Fire requirements. We're providing a looped water system with hydrants surrounding the building. So hopefully that should not be a concern. I think that's addressed most of the questions. Ryan addressed this in part of his discussion, but between phase 1 and phase 2, we do have a ridge line that runs north-south down the center of the building. And that ridge line, when it hits the end of phase 1, the south wall, it is at 52'10". But when we do the expansion, we will slope that roof to the south, such that the south wall and all walls of the expansion will be at 46 feet. So a large percentage of these walls, basically the entire east elevation, the entire west elevation, and when we do the expansion, the south elevation will be at 46 feet height. As I said earlier, we're trying to soften that with an abundance of landscape, fencing the truck yard, bermed landscape, and a nice landscape feature at that northwest corner of the site. The parking count is, as I discussed earlier, it meets the needs of the e-commerce use. We have illustrated additional parking that we could install at this point if we thought it was necessary. But we'd hate to install a big asphalt paved yard and not see a single car park in it. Hopefully that addressed most of those comments.
Yeah, I think that was good, and I bet we stayed within our 5 minutes. So
you did.
Perfect.
You have
All right, back.
A minute and 20 seconds left.
We'll see. We'll give that back to you. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Commissioner Savory, could I add one thing before you start the deliberations? I just wanted to have Kevin speak to one of the comments. I think there needs to be some clarification around the fact that there are system development charges and the in lieu fee. And I think it might be appropriate for the applicant to speak to that. We've not calculated the system development charges, but I believe the applicant has comparative information on what the cost of that would be. That's in addition to the in lieu.
Yes.
It's not just the in lieu. I think that's a very important point to speak to.
Yeah, Don, I'm glad you brought that up because that was the next thing I was going to say. Other than I think we were running out of time. But so the systems development charges were. And Greg, do you want to look up, or does Jennifer have that? We've calculated them. There, it's over $1 million.
It's basically $1,729 per 1,000 square feet, which with the expansion results in about a $1.44 million transportation SDC on top of the $547,000 fee in lieu of. So for traffic improvements alone, we'll be putting out, close to $2 million.
Well, and I would add, it's actually more than that, because if you consider the half street improvements that we're required to make to improve the transportation network on Malino Township and even some of Sequoia, the cost of building out that additional street and right of way is expensive, and we could certainly provide that, an estimate of that number. But that, along with the value of the land that we purchase from the seller and then dedicate to the county or to the city, that whole package there is well over $1 million. My sense is that our all-in to support the transportation network in this area is probably $3.5 million.
And just one more comment, Kevin. The SDCs, would those go directly to offset pine and ivy impacts?
Yeah, so the pine intersection is included on your SDC list, and in addition to what it has become the Walnut Street extension, so that they are contributing towards all of those improvements system wide. In addition to the ivy they're mitigating their proportional impact at those locations with the fee in lieu analysis. So that is their project impact from a traffic perspective, to mitigate the impact back to the ODOT standards on the highway. And there were no impacts at city intersections off of the highway.
And just one final question. So the cross section of the roadway, which is a concern for the House Street, do you know what that will entail in terms of what that road would look like, the 37 feet?
You'll just end up with you'll end up with 2 lanes and a center turn lane, and then you'll probably just have a shoulder on the applicant side of the street until the other side is eventually redeveloped.
Thank you.
Okay,
To
so
follow up on that, it will look exactly like First Avenue. We'll have a 12-foot lane, 6-foot bike lane, and a lot of it will be undeveloped at this point.
thank you. Okay, I'm closing the public hearing portion of this, and we'll move along to final thoughts and questions by the commissioners. As usual, we'll start with my good friend, Commissioner Mills, who I will apologize to right away. I didn't circle back to you as you requested. I apologize. I apologize for that, Jeff.
And I'm going to punish you by taking extra time.
Well, that's your prerogative, buddy.
I apologize in advance for that.
Wait, who are you punishing, Jeff?
I will apologize to you all. I'll try to keep it short. I share everyone's concerns about the traffic, but I see no basis to deny this project based upon the congestion concerns. Our own city engineer is telling us that we're good, even though we are very bad. As noted, the transition period could run 5 to 12 years, and it could be a little bit of a nightmare for a lot of people, including people that live in the area. But I'm still not sure how we vote against it. I am sure how I'm going to vote against it, and I will be voting against it because I do not think the applicant has satisfied the conditions for the height increase. Now, I know you all have expressed a lack of concern for the height increase, and you all being some of the other commissioners. But I tell you, that's a tripwire, and that's a tripwire for specific code language that we must review and agree is met, and it is not met, okay? It's not met. And an example is the variance is necessary to ensure that the applicant maintains substantially same property rights as possessed by the other owners of the property in the city within the same zone. They're asking for more property rights, not less. They're not losing. They're going to be taking more. And I think staff has conceded that. Granting this variance will not materially be detrimental to the intent or purposes of the comp code. Let me skip that one for now. I guess where I'll go first is it also cannot have a negative impact on surrounding properties. That's one of the conditions in this case. If it was a 45-foot high building, we would not be able to consider negative impacts to surrounding properties, as in the case 2 weeks ago with the State Street apartments, where code drove us to put that in, even though it was damaging to surrounding properties. In this case, it is damaging to surrounding properties. It will hurt values. It will hurt view for the R1s, and that being the houses nearby, and also the industrial zoned single family housing to the north. Those properties are all hurt, and that condition is not satisfied. There's no way you can take these 6 conditions and say they're met. I do not agree with staff, and I'm not voting for it on that basis. That's all I've got. I kept it short.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. Commissioner Trundy.
I have to say that I agree with Commissioner Mills on that those 6 areas that the applicant needs to meet are not met. And my biggest concern is that the impact on the neighboring people, by making it taller, they're putting that condition out there for us to consider. And
I agree with Commissioner Mills on that. I want to see things going into the industrial park. I want to see people, taking into consideration the rest of the community. I like the setbacks. I like all the things that they're doing there, but, by not meeting that variance or meeting the rules of the variance, I just can't vote for it.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pat.
So first, I just wanted to take an opportunity to thank all those that spoke from the community. I do share your concerns with traffic, being the street hawk that I am, both on the budget committee and when I go and rail at city council meetings regarding the condition of our streets. But unfortunately, for a building like this, it is more of a chicken and an egg situation. By allowing a development in like this, it brings more tax base into the city, which then allows us to put more money towards streets. And unfortunately, it is one of those things where in some cases, I look at it as a necessary evil. I think also we really need to do more to educate people purchasing homes in this community as to where they're purchasing their homes. When I bought my house, there was a vacant field behind me and I had a view of Mount Hood. Now I have the view of my neighbor's back windows. When I bought the house, I knew that was coming because I did the research. And I really think that we need to put more emphasis for realtors and such in the city that they need to make it clear when people buy these properties or when a person buys a property in Canby that they pay attention to where that property is. Because in some cases, I don't see where these concerns are a surprise. It's been made very clear what's going into this area, and it shouldn't be catching anybody by surprise. As far as infrastructure, I just did want to make one comment there. Back during I have no concerns regarding infrastructure. The city is prepared for this. A case in point is during the ice storm when both substations for the city were down. Canby Utility got the substation that is by the Fred Meyer, which is the primary one to serve this city or the industrial park up and running. And for several days, they ran the entire city's electric grid from that one substation. They did not run it from both. And so that to me proves that there is plenty of capacity within our infrastructure, at least sewer, electric, water, and those things to meet these requirements. As I mentioned before, I am not as hung up on the building height requirement as other folks. I would want to see more research done as far as what these codes look like for similar buildings from staff and whether that is something that we need to change our code. And if that's the case, then I would have less of a problem with that aspect of it. My problem is the parking. This is a 9% request in variance of parking. I do not have as big of a problem with something like a 5% variance in parking. I don't know if that's something that can be brought back, but a 9% variance I have a problem with because if the use of this facility changes and there is, I see those 26 spaces that would be added into this project if we went with a 5% variance as being very significant towards buffering any sort of capacity needs for this project. So I'm not going to say what my vote will be at this point in time. I want to hear what other commissioners have to say. But for me, that is one of the things that I am having heartburn over.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Pat. Commissioner Heath.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of bringing more jobs to Canby. I like I don't know, the plan of the whole industrial park and everything. My big hang up is still the traffic. It's a big one, as well as the parking, but mainly the traffic that's going to be diverted up Township towards I guess it would be Pine Street, Redwood Street, Sequoia. That whole area is going to be yeah, and just be hammered with more vehicles. Then I'm still never did get an answer. Why is this project being done in 2 phases? It's yeah, if you're going to do an 800 square foot building, do 700 square foot of it, and then do another 100 square foot or 100,000 square foot, it doesn't make sense. Is there any reason for doing it in 2 phases?
Chair, I'd be happy to answer that question if that's appropriate.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We just did this for Subaru in Gresham. We built 600,000 feet. And then a year and a half later, they realized they needed more space. We had accounted for another 200,000 feet, and the economics made sense for them, for us to develop out that second 200,000 feet. It's a function of having a little bit of a shock absorber in your business plan. Real estate companies, when they invest in real estate like this, you're making a very, very big commitment. And having that flexibility to add a little more capacity to your business is useful. So it's as simple as that, and that's I guess that's not simple, but that's what happens. And we just finished that for Subaru of America in Gresham. Did that answer your question?
Kind of. So it's like kind of a little bit of buffer in case a little bit of expansion, or in case needed more parking, for instance, something along them lines.
Yeah. Usually less about parking and more about the building. And I should note that Columbia, just up the street, that building is also set up. It's 500 some thousand feet, expandable to 700. So in these big users, these big sites with big commitments to an operation, that additional capacity is useful.
All right. Thank you. That was it.
That was it. Thank you, Commissioner Heath. Commissioner Hutchinson.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of a setback as almost as on one side just shy of, and on the other side just longer than a football field. That's going to make that building look pretty small, as if instead of, like, say, a 40-foot setback, a building half the size with a 40-foot setback would be considerably imposing, as opposed to a building this size that is several hundred feet away. So, honestly, I really don't see that as a problem. And I think that if they could see it in context to the other buildings, that it wouldn't bother people as much as just the change of the rule is concerned. As far as the traffic is concerned, again, I find us to be more at the mercy of the state and of the county and things that are outside our control. And if we are to curtail our plans, waiting for other agencies of government to make it possible for us to grow, we're going to find ourselves growing even slower than we had. And we're already working with plans that are a couple of decades, several decades old in some cases. I mean, I keep voting on developments that have started, 20 years before. And I have a feeling that a lot of the people who own houses now aren't people who were around at the time of the discussion when we wanted an industrial park. I know I wasn't. I came to the community after that, but I certainly am talking about it a lot now. So, a lot of the concerns that go along with an industrial park, you have those discussions at the beginning of the project, and you decide this is what we're going to put up with to get this growth. So it's an easy decision to make before you have to stare at a long line of cars not letting you out for your daily commute. And I understand that, but I'm not sure that waiting is the prudent course or most prudent course if we're looking to grow. And it seems to me like growth is Canby's goal. And that's all I got.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hutchinson. Commissioner Boatwright.
Yeah, I'm here. Traffic is a major concern to me. We're adding 1,600 vehicles a day. It looks like they'll all be going out Sequoia or Malino to Haynes. I don't see them going down Township to Ivy, but they could be doing that. They say they got 400 employees, but the peak hour trip times are 194 a.m. and 3:24 p.m. Don't they all go to work at the same time and get off at the same time, or are the shifts staggered? These traffic, what they say the streets can bear, it's never made sense to me. And I brought this up before because I'm sitting in traffic at all these lights all the time. And they keep saying they're at peak performance now, or overloaded at those 3 intersections, but we can mitigate that. How are you going to mitigate that? I don't think you can, not at those intersections. They're going to be jammed up no matter what. I appreciate the fact that the company's putting in $547,000 to help with this road congestion, but that's just a spit in the bucket when it comes to roads. I mean, my house is worth almost that much. So the parking, I could let them get away with the parking and the height variance, but I don't think we should. I think we've waited too long. We keep doing this every time. As we know there's going to be problems with traffic, and we keep being told it's going to be mitigated way down the road when we're all sitting there in the traffic for hours. I lived in Tualatin, and when I was a kid, there was nothing there. I wouldn't live in Tualatin anymore because of the traffic. In the 70s, I lived there. I pheasant hunted along I-5 there, where all those car dealerships are on the west side of Wilsonville. And another point I'd like to make is this can be growing. Most of those jobs, I'd say 90% of the jobs that are being supplied by all these industries are people from out of town. Anyway, so I think you can figure out how I'll vote.
Okay. Well, thank you, Commissioner Boatright. My major concern is going back to traffic. I cannot reconcile the fact that we have added with the Columbia, starting with the Columbia project, Columbia Distributing Project, through Stanton, Caruso, and now Canby South, that's nearly 6,000 car trips per day in addition to what it was previous. On the other hand, I'm not convinced that we don't have the capacity for it. I just feel that we do not have the capacity for it. That's a staggering amount of traffic to me. And I think that I agree with Commissioner Hutchinson that we've asked for growth. We've built an industrial park. We've designed an industrial park for this purpose. And so I think that I will be voting in favor of this project. So I will leave it to Commissioner Hutchinson I will entertain a proposal, a motion to approve the Canby South project.
So moved.
Yeah, this is.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is Commissioner Hebe. I wanted to make a motion to approve DR 21-01 and major variance 21-01.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Who is that?
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Thank you. So, all in favor?
Whoa, hold on a second, Counselor or Chairman Savory. I have a quick question.
Oh, no, is it quick? Really quick?
It is, well, it's going to be fairly quick, yes. So,
okay.
I guess my question wasn't really answered regarding the parking. is there a way to say, 9% is a bit too much of an ask, 5% would be more reasonable? Is there a way that we can kind of get some feedback and an opinion whether that would work or not? Is that allowed, or am I like swinging for the fences here? How does that work?
I think that's a process question for Don,
Yeah.
or maybe not.
And maybe and Commissioner Padden, I think when you look collectively at the entire parking scheme, and I don't know if you're breaking this into both phases or not, but I was coming up with a different percentage of variation on the parking than you were. But I think that really probably this comes down to what we discussed before, which is if this use changes, I think it could be conditioned that it's coming back to you.
Okay. Is that something that can be put into this?
Yeah, I think that could be put into the motion, and I think that's the kind of the risk the applicant takes, but I think that's where we're at.
Okay, so then I guess I should clarify. I don't want to think that it can be put into this. I want it put in. Before I say yes or no, I want to make sure that that is very clear.
And what's the request? I don't know if it's appropriate for me to speak now or not, but
So
I'm
Don,
certainly willing to listen. So
what was the percentage that you came up with?
I was looking more at 18%.
Oh, 18%. Okay. Well, I was looking at the total overall number, not by phase.
Okay, and I thought I may miscalculated, but that was the number I was.
Well, and math isn't really one of my strong points. So as a salesperson, it's probably not good to say that, but whatever. But no, I think that if the use of this building changes, that needs to be a much smaller percentage, like half that percentage.
we'd be fine with that. I mean, I don't know if if I'm speaking out of turn, Perry Mason style or not, but the parking change is important, but it's not important enough to jeopardize, a product. We wouldn't die on that sword or that hill for sure. So
Chair Savory, would you like me to pull up the slide of that condition that Commissioner Padden is kind of
that might help us out.
Okay.
All right. With the motion on the table, should I retract my motion for the time being, or
no? What you might need to do is amend your motion to include the condition that Commissioner Padden has added.
Well, now, would he have to amend it, or can I make a motion to amend it?
No, he would have to amend it.
He would have to amend it.
Okay.
It comes back to us one way or another, right? If they change the usage.
Correct.
I'm not sure we need to put something in writing. We can just reject it next time if we don't like it.
Yeah. Yeah, a similar thing with me. Like if they come back and they wanted a variance on phase 2 to do less parking, I'm going to vote no on that one in the future. So but I guess we're not there yet. So
I guess my problem is I want more parking now, but it sounds like I'm not going to get that.
I want a new Porsche.
Commissioner Padden, I might be speaking out of turn too, but I did bring up the condition about changes to the project as analyzed. So I don't know if you wanted to replace or amend this particular condition. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just, this is the one that was attempting to address the project changes issue.
I think that covers it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that covers if they come back. But the thing is I would prefer to have more parking in the first phase. I would prefer to have more parking now. Because I think there is going to be a larger demand on parking based on other buildings in the city and other problems of parking we are having in the city. I have heartburn over giving such a large variance for the parking. That's my concern.
the applicant doesn't, if we want to set a number now and condition it into the approval, I would be okay with that. I don't know if I'm, it's kind of funny if we could just sit in a room and we had a plan in front of us, it feels like we could really make this simple. But, if there was a number that you were thinking of, like I said, the parking here, that the number that is in front of you is just based on, our assessment of what the needs were going to be. But if there's a concern that there's not a little bit of a shock absorber, I guess, for parking here, we'd be willing to add some parking. I don't have an issue with that. I don't know how it works in this approval and condition process, but I'm just speaking directly and openly.
So if that's the case, then I'm going to throw out. So they're at 745, right? So it's 66 spaces that they're asking. I would like to see another 33 spaces added to that, or whatever makes sense.
That's fine.
I would like to see that.
That's fine. Good, Greg. Just give me a nod.
That would be
put 33 more spaces on our site.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have to amend our?
Yes. Yeah. I'll amend my motion to add those 33 additional spaces.
Okay. I think, Don, can you help us with the wording that we now have changed on the motion?
And just to clarify, Commissioner Patton, the 33 spaces would be if a change happened?
No.
Or you're adding? Or
33 spaces now.
Okay. So I think that essentially what they're going to end up needing to provide then would be 745 plus 33.
Correct.
So that I think that would be the applicant will need to provide a minimum of 778 parking spaces on site.
Correct.
That's acceptable to us.
Okay.
It seemed, I'm sorry if it seems petty, but I'm going to squeeze as many parking spaces as I can because I know this is going to be a problem.
Okay, so does Commissioner Heeb have to amend his motion to reflect that?
I think he should and add that in as a caveat that with the condition that the project will have a minimum of 778 parking spaces on site.
Okay.
Commissioner Savory?
Yes, Commissioner Bartlett.
I think that's both phases. I think Commissioner Patton is only requesting them on the first phase, and that's 637 plus the 33.
Okay, you're correct. Yeah, you're correct. So I guess that's okay. That's a question there.
Because the spaces they had kind of hatched in for the future phase was meeting the requirement. So it was the spaces for the original phase that were deficient.
That's a good point. So it'd be 607 versus 637.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, 670. So thank you. So that would be for the first phase. There'd be a minimum of 670 parking spaces.
And we're fine with that.
So
wait a minute.
Just a minute. This is
Yeah.
Commissioner Boatwright again, because it says required spaces for the first phase are 663. So if they built 663, which is a little 20 something more spaces, they would meet the requirement.
Well, only for the
first phase,
the warehouse component, because it on the line above that, it's, I don't, if you're looking at my slide, there's also 40 spaces for the office component.
Oh, okay.
So yes, that's a good clarification. So they're not exceeding the standard; they're still below it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Commissioner Heeb, have you got all that? And are you
May I
prepared?
just say something that might make it a little easier?
Sure.
Since the possible size of the building and everything else might change, can we just say that the project is approved with the agreement that parking spaces will be within 5% of the required amount? That way we're not quibbling over 1 or 2 parking places, but it needs to be within that. We're not giving them a variance of more than 5% off of what's. Does that fit what you're trying to do, Commissioner Padden?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
And that way it doesn't say, uh-oh, they did this and they changed the project and now it's a smaller building, but they still have to have X number of parking spaces, because that's silly.
I think that would be okay. I just would want to see what the math is here. So where are we at right now with what we had just with the?
That would be 35 spaces versus 33 is my math.
Yeah, that's fine.
It seems like a good motion because if our office size is 10,000 feet versus 30,000 feet,
Yeah, good point.
5% would be more applicable.
Yep. Yeah, that'd be fine. Thanks, Greg.
Okay, Commissioner Heeb, do you want to restate your motion?
Yes, I will amend my motion on the approval of DR 21-01 and variance 21-01 to state that the parking spots need to be within 5% of the required spaces.
Do I have a second?
Does it have to be the same person seconding it?
Not necessarily.
Then I will second it.
Okay. So, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so the ayes have it, and it's passed. I'm sure we'll be seeing this again.
I'm sure too.
Okay, moving along with our agenda, since we don't have final findings anymore, we will be items of interest from the planning staff.
Commissioner Savory, just a few items. One you mentioned at the beginning of the hearing, we will be going live in person in July. So the next hearing will be here at City Council on July 12th. And City Council will be meeting, I believe, as well on July 7th. So there was an announcement by the governor, and so we will be doing that. We'll also, I believe, continue Zoom for those who want that option. In particular for some of the hearings that we've advertised, because we advertised, I believe, those as Zoom. So we'll be giving the option of in-person and Zoom.
Okay.
I don't know how long that will stay in that both options, but we are going back to in-person hearings. The other thing I just wanted to mention is the Department of Land Conservation and Development. There are 2 grants that we're seeking funding for the housing needs analysis and housing production strategy. Those will both be submitted this week, hoping that we will be given funding for both those programs. More to come. Planning Commission will definitely be involved in work sessions and in hearings over probably the next year with that. The anticipation is if we do get funding, the consultants that we hire for that will probably be on board in September or October of this year. They will be pre-approved consultants from the DLCD current list, which will make it relatively easy for us to get them approved. So the main thing is the legislature needs to provide funding. That's not 100% secured, but it looks promising. And that's it for planning staff.
Okay, thank you, Don. Any items of interest that the planning commissioners would like to discuss with staff?
I'm just going to let you know I will not be at the meeting on the 12th because of the topic of the hearing. I'm going to recuse myself, so I'm not going to attend.
Okay. All righty. Thank you very much, Commissioner Trendy.
I do have one other thing.
Yes.
And maybe I missed it, but we used to have in our meetings and I thought I saw it on the agenda, but maybe it just skipped past pretty quick, was the time for non-agenda items, comments on non-agenda items. And I feel like today's discussion, this evening's discussion, kind of went off on some tangents that would have been better served to maybe come up during that time instead of as a part of an applicant's discussion. So I just want to throw that out there that maybe that's a better place for it. And if things do start going off on tangents, that those people be invited to come back at a future meeting and talk during the non-agenda item time.
Okay. And as chair, I will try to be much more aware of that. Thank you.
Okay. And I think that's also this time during this items of interest or guidance from Planning Commission is also a good time for some of the discussions that come up with other planning commissioners to bring up those items that they're curious about.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion, Jonathan.
It is. Okay.
Chair Savory.
Yes.
Real quick, I wanted to unless I will be elsewhere on the 12th, but if calling in is an option remotely still, I will most likely participate. So just as a heads up for city staff, and I can kind of sort that out depending on whether that'll work or not to still participate. I also did want to just for Don, there was quite a bit mentioned regarding concerns coming from the traffic safety committee. I don't know if you can work with the city administrator, and now his name is escaping me.
Scott. Yeah, Scott Archer. Scott Archer. Yeah.
And maybe if the folks on the it's possible that the folks on the traffic safety committee could use some more detailed information regarding the TSP and provide them with some information. And if they have not asked specific questions regarding the TSP, and it sounds like there might be some, provide them with that outlet. I'm a big proponent of making sure that those people who are volunteering on these city committees feel like they're engaged and a part of the system. And I think that, might be a good idea for those folks to get more information on that.
And thank you for that comment, Commissioner Patton. I've actually spoken with Scott Archer already, and we were planning to do a work session with the Traffic Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission, and Council with DKS to explain the details of this. It's somewhat complicated, as you guys understand, on this process. And I do feel like there's misunderstandings regarding how we go about these traffic assessments. What are the thresholds that we're looking at? And how does that fit into the overall transportation system plan, including timing? And so I've actually started that conversation with Kevin and Chris at DKS as well. I don't have an exact time on that, but I 100% agree with you. I don't think this issue is going to go away, and I think education is extremely important.
Well, the education and the listening part as well. I think that those folks, as dedicated as they are, should have some as the city rolls into doing that traffic, the TSP, that they be stakeholders in that process as well.
100% agree, and that TSP again. I'm hoping that we're on board with that, like funding wise. That's 100% funded like next June, and so we can take off from there. I know there's more and more traffic with these projects. Want to be sensitive to that. I think the challenge is that how does it fit into globally the system, and it's a concurrency thing that you have. People expect the roads to be concurrent with development, and they are, but there's some sequence to that, and it's an understanding of how that works.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you for your input on that, Jason. Really appreciate it. So now I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Have a second.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Everybody have a good evening. Stay cool, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
It's quite pleasant outside.